ULI is over 45,000 members in 80 countries in the Americas, Europe, and Asia Pacific, across every profession related to real estate and the built environment, from investment to design and development and everything in between. We are united with one shared purpose.
What drives us is the opportunity to make a difference, to make the world a better place through what we add to the built environment. Because what we build and how we build it fundamentally determines how people live, how they work and play, their access to community, nature, and activities. The impact of our work is transformative.
We make that difference through connection with other members, with our communities. ULI brings people together, which creates the space to put ideas together.
We share our knowledge and experience to cultivate bigger, broader thinking. We produce best-in-class research, education, and content on urgent global issues, all to inspire continual innovation of best practices for equitable and sustainable land use.
We are leaders in the built world because we apply these best practices to solve real challenges facing communities worldwide. Solutions that add to our global knowledge base. It is an ongoing cycle of adaptation and advancement driven by our desire to make the built world better.
Our mission statement expresses why ULI exists. It's our North Star, our vision. It's what directs us to do what is right, to set an uncompromising example, to build a better tomorrow.
ULI is its members, and together we fulfill our mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Jeff Reeder, Chair of ULI of Central Florida.
Hello. Good afternoon and welcome to the 2023 ULI Central Florida Real Estate Trends Conference. My name is Jeff Reeder of Reeder Communities, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the chair of ULI Central Florida. I've had the great benefit of previewing today's event over the past few months, and I cannot tell you how excited I am for the program we have ahead of us. For those here who aren't familiar with the Urban Land Institute, our organization is the oldest and largest network of cross-disciplinary real estate and land use experts in the world. ULI is its members who deliver the mission to create thriving communities around the globe. Our purpose is to connect members, inspire best practices, and to shape the future of the built environment, to solve real estate-specific challenges, and to ensure equitable and sustainable land use in our local communities. Our local district council, ULI Central Florida, is rapidly approaching 400 members, which ties into a network of over 45,000 real estate professionals globally. I'd like to encourage you to get involved in ULI. There's so many ways to participate: to support programming efforts, to network, to mentor on our real estate diversity initiative and urban plan programs, and to garner insight from the world's leading experts through ULI published reports and year-round programs. We have a tremendous program calendar ahead of us, so we hope to see you again in the near future. Please reach out to me or anyone on our management committee to learn more about how to get involved. Our event today has been masterfully co-chaired by Dory Madison of Axon 2 and Curtis Strodka of VHB, with a committee that has been vital to its planning, including Richard Levy of Levy Consulting, Daniel Williams and Rachel Frohart of PCL, Kathy Hadaway of Pre-Development Advisors, and Bob Mosier of RVI. We have an incredible group of leaders to collaborate with, including our management committee and advisory board, many of whom are here today. Thank you to our executive director, Kelly Seif, who continually finds a way to outdo herself in orchestrating this event each year. Our event sponsors make this possible: Zom Living, RVI Planning, Atwell Engineering, Institutional Property Advisors, a Marcus & Millichap company, and Axon 2. Thank you to our annual sponsors who help to sustain the mission of ULI: It's a great privilege to partner with such quality organizations. If you're interested in sponsorship, please reach out to myself or Charlie Dorr, PCL, who leads our committee. Lastly, we have the privilege of being joined by some of our regional elected leaders this afternoon. City of Orlando Commissioner Jim Gray, serving on our final panel in his CBRE role, as well as Lake County Commissioner Sean Parks. Please help me in recognizing these outstanding organizations and leaders. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our MCs of the afternoon, Dory Madison and Curtis Strodka.
So today, for this gathering of incredible talents and brains in the business, our goal is to provide you with maybe some insight into how Central Florida's real estate market can remain resilient and ready for the future. So to do that, we need to understand how we're handling nearly 900 people moving to Florida a day. And that means, in addition to the 3.2 million residents and about 75 million annual visitors. We have a lot to do here, don't we? So, Kurt?
So we have a great show for you here tonight. I always wanted to say that. Our group of panelists in the next few hours will help you to understand who they are, where they live, where they work, and really what drives them, what are their passions. We hope that you leave us better informed about some of the real estate activities that are going on within the region that you can take back to your own communities.
So we're starting off with a panel that's going to help you know the macro trends regionally, statewide, and national, so we can compare how are we doing across the country. And next, we're having a TOD.
Yeah, we'll transition to transit-oriented development and a discussion on what's worked and what we can still do a little bit better on. We'll next talk about the affordable housing crisis and how the public sector and private sector are working together to break down silos.
And for those of us who've lived here a while, the next session is kind of astounding. Luxury hotels are coming here, and that panel's going to help us understand why now instead of when Disney first showed up. And lastly, I think our group, we have a discussion between two people you'll probably have recognized, and they're going to talk about the demographics and economic mix changes that we've experienced in the past, 10, 20 years that are driving real estate trends. So our first panel is going to be led by Cindy Campbell. And Cindy is an attorney with Seyfarth Shaw, and she's also the chair of our Urban Land Institute Central Florida Real Estate Diversity Initiative, which has entered its second year, and it's so successful. And now, third team of leaders coming out of that. So thank you, Cindy, and we're leaving, and you take over. It's all you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dory and Kurt, for the gracious introduction. I'm going to ask the speakers, the panelists, to go ahead and make their way up here while I introduce them. Our first, I want to say that you will leave here armed with the best and most reliable information concerning our region once these panelists are done today. So first, we have Mitch Rochelle, who's the founding partner of Macro Trends Advisors, LLC, which is a real estate investment, and macro market strategy firm based in Southeast Florida. Mitch has over 35 years of experience serving a wide array of real estate investors, foreign and domestic. He's a widely recognized commentator on real estate, housing, public policy, business trends, capital markets, and the economy. And if you get him afterwards at the networking event, he'll talk to you about just about anything. And then we also have Lisa Diltz, who's the principal of CompSpring, which is an organization that provides real estate analysis and market feasibility studies. She has over 21 years of experience in real estate advisory and has worked with a diverse array of clients, including cities, counties, developers, lawyers, national home builders, equity funds, and large landowners. She's been a speaker at numerous ULI and HBA programs, and most recently the UF Trends Conference last week. She's an active member of ULI Central Florida and is the executive chair of the state product councils for ULI. And last but certainly not least, we have Valerie Tatum, who is a senior research analyst at Colliers International, which we all know is a global brokerage firm and supports its Central and West Florida markets. She spent 22 years in the commercial real estate industry with more than 15 years focused on research. She leads market research and analysis for the Florida commercial real estate market by using quantitative data gathered to develop an understanding of client behavior, demographics, and economic movement cycles. She's an active member of Colliers Women's Network and Black Professional Network Group, and she mentors women and people of color in the commercial real estate industry. She's also the author of various industry diversity and inclusion and data storytelling articles. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here. So I want to open our discussion by mentioning that the recently released Orlando MSA market update report, it describes positive consumer sentiment within Q1 of 2023 with respect to our local market. And this is despite any ongoing economic uncertainty. So by most accounts, certain key indicators pointed towards robust spending and low unemployment. However, as a foundation for the conference, we want to hear your thoughts and a general overview on our projected growth in the next few years, given a cooling in the housing market and continued supply chain and lending challenges. So Mitch, we'll go to you first. So in relation to state and national trends, would you give us a brief overview of the general status of the Central Florida market, along with the relevant contributing factors to each indicator?
Sure, thanks.
Don't forget your mic.
They spent like 10 minutes telling us what to do, and I forgot it. So two things. I think I was here last around this time in 2019, so it's good to be back in Central Florida. The difference was when I was here last time, I had a New York driver's license, and now I have one of these, a Florida driver's license. And by the way, this is a real Florida driver's license, not one of the fake ones that I got for my kids so that they can drink when they were in college.
See what I said?
There's no law enforcement officials here. The other thing I realized when I was getting dressed for this, I was in the Keys all weekend fishing, and I realized, do I have to put on socks to do this? And I decided I wasn't. So I'm a legitimate Floridian. If you want, I can take off my shoes. You can see my flip-flop tan. I've become a real Floridian. But in any event, so I look at it two ways. I look at it, what's going on nationally that's potentially wrong, and what's going on in Florida that's obviously right, because Valerie's got some amazing statistics that'll be behind us in terms of population growth. 900 people a day moving to Florida. I'm one of them. So on that day, there are 899 other people that moved here. But why is that happening? So I make this sort of macro observation. I don't think COVID really, in that 3 years, really changed any of the fundamental trends in real estate. What it did was it just hyper-accelerated them. So what we saw was retail sector being disrupted. We saw housing affordability being a challenge. We saw the relevance of office space being questioned in terms of people working remotely. That was already happening. We saw industrial being pushed to the max in terms of last mile. We saw the lodging industry trying to figure out where they should be on the brand spectrum. All of those things were happening, and then everything shut down, and Zoom became a thing, and it all changed. So you fast forward to today, sort of what's happening. We have an economy that is likely going to find itself potentially in another recession, maybe this year, maybe the next year. We saw 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth at the beginning of this year, which is one indication of recession. We've seen interest rates being high. For those of you who know me, I published Emerging Trends in Real Estate with ULI for a long time, probably 20 years when I was at PwC. Every year in Emerging Trends, we would ask people what was going to happen in the next year. Every person would say interest rates are going up, and they were wrong every year, and then it's happened. So interest rates are high, will likely be high. But sort of what's happening here in Florida that makes sense, that doesn't happen, there seems to be collaboration between private capital and the public sector in Florida. And when I say public sector, I just mean government in general. That seems to work when it doesn't work elsewhere. And that's the interesting thing about COVID and what happened, which is people who were frustrated with rules around the country found that rules were different in Florida, whether that be rules for capital, whether that be rules for restaurants being open, whatever. And that became the thing that was attractive. You could say very simply that it was no taxes in Florida and taxes in New York, but I think it's more than that because history is no different, right? There's been a different tax structure in Florida than there was in New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut prior to COVID. So why didn't people move before? I think it's the fact that you can do business more easily in Florida than you can in other places. I'll say one last thing before I go. Everything I could say about Florida for the next 45 minutes, which would be positive, maybe holds true for Texas, right? Texas has a lot of the same pro-business, pro-development, pro-change attributes. It's a lot harder, though, to do business in Texas if you're an outsider. It's not so hard to do business in Florida if you're an outsider. And we can talk more about what I mean. So I think that notwithstanding the fact that there's a potential recession looming, if there was a place in the country that could weather that storm, it's Florida, because it's weathered the last 3 years, and I think the economy in Florida has proved its resilience in a way that I personally haven't seen in my 40 years of doing business back and forth down here.
So would you say that COVID actually was, to a certain degree, a positive situation for Florida?
I wouldn't say that COVID was positive for, COVID aside, you know,
Yes.
other than loss of sense of taste and smell. Listen, I've been to some restaurants where, you know, I kind of wish I had COVID because the food didn't taste that good. But the fact of the matter is, the resilience of this state and its population, its government, at the local level, at the state level, was stronger than the headwinds or tailwinds of COVID. That's the way I would put it, and I'm trying to be as apolitical as possible. But I've never seen anything like it, because I lived in New York for half of that period of time, and like literally no one could make a decision. And in Florida, for some reason, decisions were getting made, and that's not Tallahassee, that's down to the county level, the local level, and that's both blue and red, whatever. So Florida just seemed to figure it out, where 49 other states couldn't.
Agreed. And then do you think that it forced us also to look at our economy and diversifying that economy as well as bringing tech companies here? What do you think about that?
I've always said that jobs chase people, not the other way around. And if there's anything that I learned in 20 years of publishing emerging trends, it's that. And the mother's milk of real estate is job creation, right? If you don't have jobs creation, you don't have vitality in real estate. And you know, employers were coming down here because the people were coming down here. And our economy is shifting. 70% of our GDP comes from the service industry. We're a service industry-driven economy. You can't have a service industry if you don't have it on the backs of human beings. And if 900 of them are moving here a day, it just makes sense for companies to come down here. Yes, hedge funds, private equity types, they were coming down here because they wanted a better shelter taxable income. But the fact of the matter is, when their traders could do business from their living room in their pajamas, they might as well be able to walk outside and be in nice weather. And that's going to continue. I think Florida's biggest challenge, which this afternoon we'll unpack, is how do you manage 900 people moving down a day? Because if you live in my part of the state and you drive south on 95 at the wrong time of day, forget about it. You know, I can't get to, the casino in Hollywood. Now you know more about me. But I can't get there without waiting in traffic for an hour and a half. That's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Right?
And so I've put on the screen the slides that you guys have produced with respect to the amounts of people moving here and the percentage gain that Florida's had, mainly from California, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and New York. So what types of challenges are those producing? We'll start with you, Mitch, and then we'll pivot to Lisa to talk about those challenges with housing.
Housing affordability was a problem before. I've always said that Here's something I just don't fundamentally understand. If you have prices going up and you manufacture something for a living, all right, let's say a widget, you're going to create more supply of those widgets because you can sell them at a higher price. That's sort of microecon, for those of you who remember that class. So why aren't we doing that in housing? I refer to it as the 3 L's, land, lumber, and labor. Anybody who's used that expression stole it from me. I can pull the videotape of when I coined that. But land prices have gotten high. Lumber, which is the holding place for all building materials, has gone up dramatically, supply chain challenges. And labor, we have this tremendously disrupted labor market, okay? Add 2 more, lenders and laws. So there still are permits and zoning and all that stuff that interfere with the ability to create more product. And then lenders, the cost of borrowing has gone up. So, but we are undersupplied in housing in this country. And the only solution to that is builders, forgive me if that's what you do for a living, need to find a better way, smarter way, and a cheaper way to build, because the old-fashioned ways of doing it just don't work anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're going to get into that with the Affordable Housing Panel. So, Lisa, what do you think with respect to, can you provide the level set as to where we'll be with housing in Florida and Central Florida specifically?
Over the next year? Or,
Over the next couple of years.
Well, to build on Mitch's comments about, there's always been demand for Florida, right? And COVID really put that into hyperspeed. And so people that kind of contemplated moving to Florida, in the next few years or so, when they have flexibility to work from home, said, oh, now's my time, right? I can just, preemptively move, 5 years before I had planned to move. And so we saw a lot of that. And then also younger people that could, work from anywhere. And so the combination of those things, then the map, which is, not up anymore, but the map that was up that showed the direct immigration, particularly from New York and California, really that with cheap money, we saw a very steep step up in our prices here in Central Florida. And so where that's left us right now is the prices are still pretty high. We've seen a little bit of easing actually. And it really depends on if it's a public builder or a private builder and the volume that builders have to meet. More on the public side, we've already seen prices go down a little bit because they've got to work through volume, especially as inventory comes to market. So interestingly, we actually we gather the net and gross sales from builders each month in the Central Florida market to see what's going on, just get a real-time check. And last May, we all know kind of the brakes were pumped on the housing market as rates continued to rise. We really started to see that things were slowing down. But when we look this year, from December 2022 to January 2023, there was a 60% increase in home sales and new home sales, which is kind of a hidden story. You aren't hearing that. But what we saw is because incentives, builders really came strong with incentives. Some of them were trying to close out their year end. They were reducing some inventory, priced homes. And then the big thing also is rate buy downs to be able to open up that, the pool of buyers to be able to purchase homes. So we'll see where we landed in February. We'll get that report out soon. But we saw, from December 2021 to January 2022, it was a 9% increase. If we look from December of last year to January this year, it was a 60% increase in new home sales. So we definitely are seeing, we saw that growth. We'll see builders are calling it kind of green shoots. They're saying, we're seeing some encouraging things. But overall, prices are still relatively high. And so it really cuts out a large portion of the market, going to the affordable conversation later. So as we look at the year ahead, many builder clients that we work with have pencils down, and they're saying, until land costs come down, until, cost of materials come down, we really can't participate in a meaningful way right now, knowing that rates are potentially going to rise, and we're going to cut out even more potential buyers and their affordability. So I think we will see, we won't see, there was kind of that anomaly from December to January of builders bringing down some inventory prices. I think we can expect to see a slower total volume year. Probably something that maybe actually looks a little bit like 2022. We'll see how high rates get. But, again, also to echo, Mitch's comments, overall, Orlando is a great market and Florida is a great state. And when we talk to builders about what they're seeing, we are still a shining star. When, divisions look across the nation of where they want to place their money, they want to place a lot of money in Orlando, and that will continue. So while it may be a slower year for the long run and the long term, we see a lot of really positive attributes that the sky is not falling in Orlando.
Thank you, Lisa. And I know that a lot of myself and a lot of my colleagues in here want to know about the commercial real estate market and how that's progressing. When we're talking commercial, we're talking retail, office, industrial trends. Valerie, which sectors do you see as strong and which aren't?
Well, actually, and I think the next slide might give a little more detail on that. So in an employment, I'm sorry, the next slide. It's an employment slide.
Okay.
We are seeing that employment is high in all sectors, which that's what's going to keep the rates going. That's what's going to keep the market busy. And they all kind of run together. You have retail, who is very strong, mainly in the quick service restaurants. And I think that's more because they've stepped outside of the box and they're doing a little different. They're looking at experiential type restaurants. They are, instead of taking the negative of COVID, they saw some of the things that they could do. They listened to the people. And a lot of our brokers are out there talking to the clients, and that's what they're looking for. Places to bring people, families, this is what they were looking for. That translated into industrial. Industrial has stayed hot, throughout COVID. It got even more. We're seeing a slight, with the amount of industrial space that hit the market, it's taken a little more time to absorb that space. Mm-hmm. But with the amount of people still coming to Florida and everything that's going on, we see that space being absorbed quickly. And that still goes into, we look at office. Office space, even though we see a lot of sublease, the demand is still there. So you'll see employment still high in office because the demand is still there. But we think that they're going to also have to think outside of the box a little more, and how, just as the retail did, and see what type of different avenues can they go to bring people back to the office, or what else can they do with that space? Because the remote working is here to stay. Mm-hmm.
So now, have you seen some positive transitions with the office space? What have brokers or landlords been doing with that space? What are these new
In Orlando,
uses?
they're still trying to figure that out. Okay. We have some other states that they're starting to take that space into residential. I think we do have some problems in Orlando with parking and density and things like that, but you don't know. That's that think outside of the box that we're going to have to explore in order to know exactly what we're going to do. But right now, I think the office is still trying to figure it out. They're still trying to figure out what they're going to do with the remote working. I don't think companies are set yet as to what they want to do.
Agreed.
And so that's that market. So everything is just transitioning into each other, but because we have the amount of people coming to Florida, to Orlando, and you'll see on one slide, as they build up in the Orlando area, it's also the outskirts. So Seminole County is building, and Seminole County is increasing. Osceola County is increasing in population and industrial strength, so is Seminole. So whereas Orlando is getting built out, we're seeing it goes to the outskirts. So it's still the total MSA. Lake County is another one that it's just really hot in those areas.
So now, during our call, you mentioned that a diversified economy needs intentional cultivation, because we were discussing the fact that Orlando in specific was traditionally a hospitality area because of Disney and all the theme parks. Explain what you mean by this, and how do we as a community achieve that type of diversification? Did we learn this during the pandemic? Is this one of the lessons learned?
Well, I think they are going to have to look at the fact that you can't just be tech, because we saw Google lay off, we saw Meta lay off, we saw the layoffs in tech, so we can't just drop our eggs in the tech basket, even though that is going to be important for the area. I think a lot of the small businesses that started to come during the COVID era, we're going to have to start going into looking at the incubator programs, looking at these small businesses, and starting to change our thoughts on how to bring them out and get them started. Mm-hmm. So that's that diversity that we have to look at and start listening and looking at the different industries that are out there instead of the typical industries that we go to.
Thank you, thank you. So Lisa, I'll ask you this. So Florida Realtors Association recently reported that the inventory across the state of Florida was higher in November 2022 than in the year prior for the existing single-family homes and condo and townhome units. So Aura recorded 2230 existing home sales in December, which was down 42% from December 2021. Are we seeing a cooling in the market, and is there a rise in inventory? Is this in new builds or in existing homes? So where would you say that we're now in a buyer's market?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are definitely more towards a buyer's market in that, again, you know, if we separate out new from resale. So on the resale side, we're seeing that there are more days on the market. In well-located areas, we still are seeing activity. I mean, if you go to Lake Nona, there is still a lot of activity. It has slowed some, but you know, the inventory, I think what we are keeping an eye on is builders have been working so quickly to try to fulfill the demands and the need of people standing in line for the past year, 2 years, and now they're bringing all these homes like, okay, I've got your house, right? And the question is the buyer there for that house now, and can they qualify? And so we're seeing some of that where the homes are then delivered and they're having to resell it again because the person that signed up for that home can no longer, life circumstances, whatever it is, also rates can no longer actually be the person that buys it. So I think we will see a little bit of a rise in inventory in those situations, and we are, you know, paired with that is a rise in incentives. And so we are definitely seeing that, you know, for inventory homes, production homes. You know, I was in a community the other day, and they said, we're spending about $100,000 to get every sale. And it was like a $400,000 home. So, you know, and that was, you know, half off lot inventory, or half off lot premiums, half off design center options, rate buy down. Now, that's not in every community. In that community, we watched their prices rise pretty steadily relative to what was being delivered, and they kind of got in over their skis. But in, you know, in areas that are well priced, they are moving. Buyers are looking for the deals, but it definitely is tipped more towards a buyer's market.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So when we talk about 900 people, Mitch, moving here per day, I know there are very unique challenges that the pressure of that type of growth can put on this economy. What should we be turning our attention to with respect to that growth?
Well, it depends on the demographics of who's moving here. While I was driving up here, I heard an interview with a South Carolina state senator who was proposing a tax on people who are moving to South Carolina because the majority of the people moving to South Carolina, according to this state senator, were older, which means that the infrastructure that they're going to need in South Carolina isn't paid for because these folks aren't potentially earning money, which means that the income tax that they have in South Carolina doesn't work. I think at the macro state level that you need to think about migration, what the infrastructure needs are going to be, and how that's going to get funded. At the local level, I think that's necessary as well. But I think the real challenge and real opportunity, to sort of Valerie's point, is how to, and by the way, there's this misnomer that people have that the only people who move to Florida are old people who are moving to, you know, like some 55 and older community. And you know, that's not the case. I mean, Florida's demographics are getting younger and younger, and there's going to be a population boom in Florida just, you know, through natural order of things. So those are all potential workers. So how does government create the right incentives to convince employers to come down here and not think about this the way you would have thought about it 5 years ago. 5 years ago, if a government wanted to create incentives, they create some property tax holiday to convince a company to move here so that the company would build an office building that could house 10,000 people. That's not the way anymore when you have people working remotely. So you have to think about it all the right way. And I think if you do that, you can continue to prosper as a state and as a local community, as a series of counties. But it's hard. And the one thing I would just encourage this audience to do not think of things like the good old-fashioned ways. Like we used to do it this way, because I think in March of 2020, we all learned one thing: you can't take anything for granted.
Right.
So doing things the way you used to do it just won't work, and they have to be, if your strategy isn't agile, your strategy is going to die. And I think that that's the challenge, but it's also an opportunity.
So the strategy is always ready for change.
Constantly. Well, just think about the point Valerie made. If you exclusively were trying to recruit the big tech superstar names, the FANG names, and get them to come to this series of counties down here because they were the biggest employers, oops, that's a mistake. Because what are they doing? They're shedding talent because they overhired. San Diego, I have a research fellowship at University of San Diego. San Diego has done a phenomenal job with biotech, okay? But I've said at events there, you've got too many eggs in the biotech basket. You've got to think about diversification. I think Valerie's point was great. The diversity of the employment base is the key to success. So you've got to be recruiting employers in every possible SIC code to try to get them to come down.
So now, as the professionals, do you all believe that we're doing a good job as a state in that diversification to make sure that we don't have all our eggs in one basket, that we are introducing newer professions to the market, new sectors? What do you think?
I think we are. I do follow, my market is Southwest all the way to Orlando, and I see a lot of different diversity in companies that are coming here, and they have to be. We have the I-4 corridor that is very hot right now, and so a lot of things are going on over there, so they're going to have to diversify. It's just a lot happening in Florida. So we're looking at, and I mentioned Lake County before, because I want to continue to mention the areas that are outside in the MSA that we're moving out to. These are so important to us that we wake up and start looking into those areas because we're building out there.
No, we can definitely mention Lake County because I didn't realize until recently that it now takes 2 hours to get to Tampa because of the traffic in Lake County.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's definitely a ton of growth happening.
Leave at 10 o'clock at night, that's the trick.
Oh my goodness. And I had to come back the same day in the same amount of traffic. So where are we seeing the most growth, like the most unrelenting demand with respect to the commercial space?
Industrial.
Industrial?
Industrial, but I don't want to lack out the retail because retail quick service restaurants are very high. But industrial is, it's killing the market right now. Multifamily, I cover some of that, but my main three are industrial, office, and retail. So those are the three I can speak on, and industrial and retail are doing well.
Yeah, it's definitely been the belle of the ball for quite some time now, right?
The one thing I'd pile on and say is we haven't talked a lot about multifamily, and if you have tremendous migration in, thinking that every one of those people is going to buy a single-family house is a big mistake. And this state is tremendously undersupplied for multifamily. And, there's a tough, for a first-time home buyer, there's this hard decision between the trajectory of rising rents for apartments and rising interest rates, and what's a better thing to do right now. The notion that the house price appreciation may cool even though interest rates are higher, as opposed to waiting a year and potentially seeing double-digit increases in rent. So if the state's got to get cracking on anything, it's building more apartments.
It's interesting that you say that because honestly, when I'm driving in Central Florida, that's all I see going up is apartments. But yet when I attend these types of events, I'm always hearing that we still don't have enough apartments.
The ones you see are the high rises because they're very, very obvious. But if you go into Lake County, there's nothing wrong with two-story garden apartment, but you got to find a way to build them better, faster, and cheaper. Because we just need so much of it that, the old-fashioned way of doing everything needs to get revisited.
Well, I think the disconnect, like you said, Cindy, you see lots of apartments going up everywhere, and the challenge is based on the price of land, the cost of materials. Those units are being delivered at the high end of the spectrum, and to Mitch's point, we are super undersupplied. Particularly for units that are $1,800 a month and less, and it's impossible to deliver that right now, new, or let's say nearly impossible, without some kind of subsidy.
Yeah. The one thing I would just say, I'm mindful of time. So one of the companies that I advise happens to be in California. California has this crazy legislation that you can tear down an existing single-family home in the state of California and as of right put up 8 multifamily units on that site without any change in land use zoning-wise. And one of the companies that I work with figured out a way to build in a factory, build all of the pieces of the house and to deliver all the pieces of the house. So, and what we'll put on that site is 2 buildings that are 4 units apiece. But it's all, I don't want to use the word manufactured because everybody's going to start thinking about manufactured housing, but it's all put together in a factory so it can get slapped together on the site like an IKEA, bookshelf. And that allows that company to deliver housing in the market a year quicker than somebody that's building it conventionally. And what they do is they pass that savings along to the tenant in lower rent because they can get to the market quicker. That's the kind of innovation that you need to solve the problems like affordability and availability of housing. And I think that there's myriad opportunities to do that, but you just got to stop thinking about it the way we always thought about it.
And Mitch, you left me with 5 seconds. So thank you all.
15 years on television, I know how to do
right
that.
Right on time. Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here. I hope that you guys learned a lot about our economy and where we are. We'll turn this back over to Kurt.
Ask Tom and Blake to make their way up to the stage. So hearing Mitch talk about the traffic on I-95, hearing Cindy talk about the traffic coming between Tampa and Orlando really makes me think maybe we need a different way of thinking about this. Maybe there's a different way that we can all get around a little bit better. I mean, show of hands, how many people drove here in a single car by themselves? Okay, almost everyone, yes, including us on the panel. This takes time. We're not going to solve this overnight. We inherited a lot of the building patterns we have, but that's why we have gentlemen like this here to help us fix it. So a quick look ahead in terms of transportation projects in Central Florida. Everybody knows about Brightline, the high-speed rail, so we're going to connect eventually Miami to Orlando, and then Orlando to Tampa. So Cindy, you'll be able to hop on that train and bypass the Lake County traffic. We have over $200 million in federal funding coming to the state for electrification, so to build out chargers along our interstate highways so that you'll be able to have range confidence instead of range anxiety when you decide to invest in an electric vehicle. We've got autonomous vehicles. We already have the Beep Shuttle operating down at Lake Nona, and that's going to be coming soon to the city of Altamont Springs. So their plan there is to connect a Sunrail station with City Hall, with the hospital, with the Altamont Mall eventually. So it's really connecting that live, work, play environment. And if that wasn't crazy enough for you all, we're going to have electric vertical takeoff and landing coming soon to Lake Nona, courtesy of Lilium and the Tavistock Development Group and the City of Orlando. It sounds a little fanciful, but I know Charlie Dorr would take this to go visit a client. People will use this type of transportation. So what I'm describing, these are all puzzle pieces. And my mentor, Jim Sellen, taught me this. We need to have the top of the puzzle box to understand how it all fits together. And that's why we have a group of planners up here to talk about some of the transit-oriented development plans as they started and how we move into the future. So I'm going to ask Blake to introduce himself and then followed by Tom.
Hey, my name is Blake Drury. I lead GAI's Planning and Urban Design Group. I am a native Floridian like Mitch. I don't wear socks, but I was born that way. So I came back to Orlando in about 2000, immediately got sent to Charlotte to work on their light rail plans, and then got sent to lots of other places to do the same. And so when Sunrail came, it was a home game. So I was thrilled to do that. And I've been involved in that realm for a long time, in addition to lots of other master planning and community planning initiatives throughout the region.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom. I'm not an urban planner. I am an economic developer technically, but I'm thrilled to share the stage with two very talented urban planners. I did know one thing. I'm not going to bring slides because they're going to have much nicer, high-quality slides in urban planning than someone in the economic development field. I've been playing in economic development for 20-plus years, primarily in Seminole County. I've worked for both Seminole County and the city of Lake Mary, had some good projects there, and have always kind of circled with the planning department to talk about things. And thrilled to talk a little bit about what the city of Sanford. Thrilled to be in Orlando. It's our favorite suburb of Sanford, and thrilled to talk a little bit more about what we have going on up there.
All right. Thanks, Tom. And Tom, do you see the slide clicker, even though you are not using slides, on the table next to you there?
No.
Cindy, did you take it with you?
I found it.
Okay.
This is like my kids looking for the remote control. Where did it go?
Okay. All right, Blake, take us away.
All right. So as I kind of mentioned, back in 2012, I can't believe it was over 10 years ago now, I was one of the group that got engaged by FDOT when Sunrail got its full funding grant agreement to start to go out to developers, to groups like this, to cities, to try to bang the drum to say we can have transit-oriented development in this community. And it's different than in other places because, this was a freight rail. It was the back of a lot of the towns that it went through. Some it went through the center, but in lots of others, it was sort of a backdoor location. And so as we presented this on behalf of FDOT as developers and owners and operators of the train, we started to put out numbers like this. We started to tell people what the opportunities were. This is sort of one of those how it started, how's it going kind of thing. So we really told people, developers, others, that there's really like three opportunities. There's increased access to jobs, there's potential rent premiums, and there's development catalyst. And we said, it's not going to turn a C location into an A location, but it'll make places better. If there was a fourth one, I'd really say, it was on the department's end, ridership. Anything that they could do to get more people riding the train would be a benefit. That's the one that we've probably fallen the shortest on. I just looked it up. The last APTA numbers said average weekday ridership is about 3,800, which doesn't sound like a lot. However, if you compare it to other systems that are similar, it's actually not that bad, which surprised me. So it's increasing, but not in the way that you would hope it would. So what happened since 2012? There we go. I look over here and I see Ryan and the heavy lift that he did in Longwood with the first project. That it was great to have that, to be able to point to it, to say, look, people can do this, people can make this investment. So in 2012, just sort of within a 10-minute walk distance of the stations, there were about 3,800 dwelling units and about 25 million square feet of commercial. If we look today, it's about 10,000 and 26 million. So, the market's delivered 6,300 units. That you look at it and go, okay, well, that really is like 3 or 4% of the entire MSA market. Not bad. It was 2% when we started, and through the years, at one point, about 15% of the new multifamily units that were being delivered were within station areas. It's settled at about 8 to 12%. So sort of the dynamics of the market have been shifting a little bit. So I kind of said, well, is that good? I don't know. So if you look at like Trinity Rail Express in Dallas, which is another system that's a lot like Sunrail, a little older, but also kind of an industrial based railroad. Or if you look at the Front Runner in Salt Lake City, which far exceeds Sunrail on ridership. It's probably 3 times the ridership. they are getting more units. The difference is they're getting units in greenfield locations, in places where there wasn't development, there was a station, and now there's development orienting to it. True sort of transit-oriented development. That's where they're seeing success, and I think that's kind of the gap here in Central Florida where we haven't really been able to crack the nut on. If we think about access to jobs, TOD commuting is still limited. So within that same station area transit shed that we look at, there's about 134,000 primary jobs. There's about 14,000 people employed who live in the station areas. But only 21 people live and work in a station area. So like you live in Maitland and you commute to Orlando Health. Like there's only 21 people who kind of do that classical orientation, but that's more than there were 10 years ago. It still is a driver and park and ride sort of system, and I think that's one of the things that we need to work on. One of the questions was rent premiums. In the market, TOD does achieve a premium somewhere in the 5 to 10% range. I think it's interesting to look at a place like Maitland where you have both, TOD like at the Parker, like you can stagger out of your room, out of your apartment and walk over across the parking lot to the station versus Maitland City Center. The Parker's getting a little less rent than Maitland City Center is, all things considered. So one thing that it has done is, if you remember what it looked like in 2004, when the city of Maitland was thinking about putting a station there, this is it. That's Parker Lumber. And so, the face of these areas has changed. And in the long run, that's really the thing that I think is the most lasting part of this, is it has, obviously taken some places where, yes, development would have happened in this spot without transit. But it's given a different orientation to it. It's given maybe a different reason for someone to live there. And then I think in the case of sort of Osceola County and things in the south, like this is Orange Avenue in 2016. I know the effort that Tom and the guys at Tupperware put to trying to develop this site for years. If that had not happened, and the Sunrail station had not come in just across the street from here, this is not something that you would see in that part of the region. So this is always my favorite TOD slide. It says transit pill, no thanks. I'll just live with the cars a little longer. I think that's really where we are. We're not in a spot where we've got a robust system that we can really rely on, but we've got a system that some people can rely on, and that's the only way you get started. You get in there and get it in place and do the knitting and the hard sort of things that build it up over the years. And I'll close with, I remember as we were doing this, Harry Barley from Metroplan would always stand up and say, in DC it took a generation for Metro to get the orientation that it has, and it will probably take a generation here in Orlando for that to happen. We're 10 years into it, and we're starting to see it. So I think Tom can probably talk about Sanford and what they're headed for with some of their station area.
Is that okay with you, Kurt?
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
All right. I can tell you a little bit about Sanford and what's occurring around our Sunrail station stop. I will tell you this, that I think if you were to drive by this Sanford Sunrail station, you say we're kind of late to the game. There really isn't a whole lot noticeable going on at that station stop. Ironically, though, I think probably within Seminole County, and that just represents 4 station stops, we did have a Riverview townhome community go in. It had 250 units. It's fee simple. It's a townhome product. And it actually had, back in the early days, it has a direct connect right onto the Sunrail platform. So it's kind of a really desirable little townhome community. So to date, we have in the development pipeline about 91 acres activated within that half-mile radius zone around a Sunrail. And I think that half-mile urban planning standard comes from, that's a 10-minute walk. And I look and I did areas equal to pi r squared, and that's 502 acres. And if I'm activating 91 with something, 91 of those acres, 500 acres, with something that looks like TOD development, and when I say TOD, but for the station stop, right? Would it have developed at that density? Probably not, right? And I think that's one way that, and I remember Blake coming through town talking to us about these station stops when these station stops were initially being discussed. I think that's the way economic development always looked at this. Is we were excited about what it's going to do at the station stops, more than how it's going to move people, right? And so I think that's probably an aspect that the ULI would appreciate. That's certainly the real estate catalyst that it provides. But if I activate 91 acres, back to that point, that's only about 18% of that 500 acres within that half-mile radius. And so if you take a pizza pie and you slice it, do 3 slices all the way across, and you have 6 slices total in the pizza pie, that's about 1 slice of pizza pie devoted towards something as TOD. And does that bother me? Well, at first I thought that bothered me, but then I realized Sanford is kind of where Sunrail goes to spend the night. The Rand Yard is there, and that is where the actual Sunrail station is maintained, parked overnight. So we do have an industrial rail yard there, and rail access to an economic developer is just something really exciting, right? And so that entire area, just a little bit of context about where that is within the city of Sanford. We have a 1.5 mile last mile problem, right? It's actually 1.5 miles to get to our downtown, and we have instituted a trolley system to try to make that last mile connection. But that's also really valuable land because it has rail access and it's an industrial area. We just last night at our city commission approved, there's a land use designation that spreads out across that area called the West Side Industry and Commerce Park. And that land use designation allows up to 40% of this industrial park to go towards residential uses. And what we're beginning to see is that this classic negative spillover from industrial being directly adjacent to residential is beginning to manifest itself, and the employers are like, hey, I have neighbors complaining, but I was here first, right? I'm doing this industrial work. And so that basically instituted us to say, look, let's look at this as an entire district, the West Side Industry Commerce Park area, where our TOD area is located, and talk about limiting the total residential maximum across the entire area to just 30% instead of 40%. And we're already at 25% of this employment-centered land use designation. And I know those of you that deal with the entitlement process of Florida, future land use designations and zoning, right? That kind of is the regulatory table within the state of Florida. And so we're basically saying, let's tap the brakes on residential allowance throughout this entire district, but if we are gonna allow residential, let's have it concentrated closer to the Sunrail stop. And so that's something that we did big picture. And I'll turn it over to you, Kurt, to move it along.
Thanks, Tom, and thank you for wearing socks today as well.
No problem.
All right, so in your role with economic development, are there aspects of transit-oriented development that you see that either help or conversely hinder the local economy?
Yeah, what I will tell you is this, and this is maybe a perspective that a lot of folks don't realize, is Blake put up a slide that looked at Salt Lake City and Dallas and compared our commuter rail system with that. One thing that I can really appreciate, and I know I've seen a couple of people from the OEP here, is that whenever we have a good fortune of meeting a company from out of town that's considering locating into town, we're in a special club now, Metro Orlando. And that special club is that we have fixed rail service, right? There's not a whole lot of places that, well, South Florida has Metro Rail and Tri-Rail, but you know, we're now in a special club, and that's actually kind of a selling point. Like, oh, all right, Metro Orlando, you know, it does have this commuter rail system. I talked to you a little bit about the fact that by virtue of developing our TOD at the Sanford Station stop, maybe I sacrifice some industrial land, but if you're going to put residential uses somewhere adjacent to the railroad tracks, we'll put them next to the station stop, right? And let's not eat up a lot of the industrial land that's elsewhere within this land use classification. And so, yeah, I thought that was probably the most, I'm not sure a lot of folks would have thought of that, but it is a big selling point to actually just say, look, we do, Metro Orlando does have a commuter rail system, and that does put us kind of in a, it eliminates a little bit of the competition.
All right, thank you. So Blake, you've been doing this for a while. What are some of the changes you've seen in TOD design, either from urban design or product mix over the last decade?
I think, just like every place else, it's getting denser. We started at a sort of intro rate, and everything is getting sort of up in the 55, 70, 120 even units to the acre range. So I think that's sort of mirrored a trend that has been happening in the market generally, but maybe has happened a little more explosively within station areas. I also think that one thing that's interesting to watch is just the dynamics of industrial development, because so many of these station areas still have kind of remnant industrial uses. And so as that dynamic changes, as industrial users tend to start to look for different things in different places, seeing what happens to that space, I think, is one of the challenges that folks like Tom have, to be able to kind of continue these areas with the vitality that they really need to succeed.
All right, thank you. So Tom, tell us a little bit more about what's happening at the Sanford Sunrail station. When I go to Sanford, it's usually to go to some of the breweries, not so much to go to the Sunrail station. So tell us a little bit more about what's happening there.
Yeah, let me do that. I think we do have 7 brew pubs, right? And I'm an economic developer, so I have to brag upon the city that I work at. And there was a great HBO special, HBO Max, and it is called Our Towns. And there was one section in that. It was just turnaround stories of towns throughout the nation. Highly recommended if you have HBO Max. I think that's what it was on. And they were quoting an urban demographer saying, so what are some good measures or metrics that you use to assess the vitality of an old downtown? And they said, well, the number of brew pubs. And so, okay, well, I thought that was kind of a clever metric. And well, we have a lot of them. We're a drinking town with a history problem, right? We have a kind of a deep history there. It's 150 years old. I'm very fond of the map that shows Orlando in this big, or in this small font, and then Sanford in a much larger font. Clearly, it's not that way anymore. But in maps and cartography, you put the bigger font for the bigger city. Has everything to do with the fact that we're on a river, and that river allowed us to settle a little bit earlier. At the TOD station stop, we have about four projects that are, one is almost completely out of the ground, one is out of the ground, the other 2 are in the works. And in total, I said they're activating about 91 acres across all 4 of them. Together, in aggregate, that's about 1,366 dwelling units. But that's across 91 acres. That's only 16 dwelling units per acre. That's not, to folks that live in urban areas, that's not that urban, right? But Sanford standards, yeah, that's kind of more urban density than we would have realized absent that Sunrail station stop. So we do have one in particular that occupies 36 acres, and that's called the All Souls PD, actually named after a church, Catholic church. And that has 650 dwelling units, and they're all in a kind of a gradient according to where their location is relative to the State Road 46, the highway, and where the station platform is. And the gradient is between townhomes, multifamily, then really dense multifamily. And that's kind of the lay of the land. I can tell you one thing that I'm a little disappointed in, since I do have a laser focus on commercial, is that the commercial total, in terms of kind of retail serving commercial, right, is just about 72,000 feet in entitlements. They haven't been built yet. And that's not a whole lot, but if you started to account for some of the warehouses that we have within that half-mile radius, once again, we're talking about much more significant square footage, but it's not married to the TOD, obviously, right? These are warehouse uses located adjacent to the Rand Yard, where our station is. Our downtown core has become somewhat of an entertainment district, right? We just had last weekend something called Porch Fest. It attracted about 30,000 people, and they just kind of swarmed downtown all in one day, right, to observe people playing music on their porches. And so, you know, basically the place, our event central, and it's really event central for all of Seminole County, is in downtown Sanford. It's kind of the historic core of the county, and we're a mile and a half away from it. So our CRA, which is our downtown CRA, funds a trolley, and it's not an inexpensive endeavor. It's $200,000 a year budgeted to basically make that last mile and a half connection between our Sunrail station and to get people downtown. And so that has been very beneficial. One other thing is that we are the southern terminus for the auto train, and the auto train is in an even more industrial section of the rail area there. And so what we do is we do have that trolley stop by and pick up auto train customers. I don't know if you're familiar with the Amtrak's auto train, but basically there's only two stops. One, the southern terminus is Sanford, the northern terminus is Lorton, Virginia, suburb of DC. So it's kind of a way for snowbirds to get a jump start on their commute, right? They can get a jump start up, they get a jump start down, and they can keep their car down here while they're here. And so what we do is we pick up these captive customers because they have to load their cars like 3 hours in advance of departure. We capture them and we take them downtown to spend their money that they earned elsewhere.
Thanks, Tom. All right, last question for Blake. What do you see as the new opportunities for new TOD markets within the region? Or where should everybody here go buy land?
Let's see, where should you go buy land? Yeah, that was a client shushing me. No. So if you've had the good fortune of spending a Tuesday morning at an MPB meeting in the past couple of years, you would have heard me say probably 5 or 6 times, we need to be building more housing at all prices throughout the region, and we have to build it faster. Like that's the number one thing we ought to do, and getting that within reach of a transit station, I think, is a bonus. I think I mentioned it talking about the front runner in Salt Lake City. Like the big thing that they've been able to do that we haven't is to tap into that greenfield new development market in a way that is meaningful in terms of the number of units that they can get in those developments access to transit. And so if I was looking at it, I would say, okay, where are those greenfield locations? Well, DeBerry, Poinciana at the two ends. Tupperware is another one. There's some stuff happening at some of the other stations, but I don't know that it's at a scale that really pushes the needle. So I think that those are sort of the residential opportunities. And then the other side of it, to Tom's point about kind of the limited amount of commercial that they have, if you look at where the ridership is, obviously Link Central Station is the number one ridership station. The two hospitals, but then the commuter stations in terms of park and ride, DeBerry and Poinciana, and to a lesser degree Meadowwoods, which is a little bit surprising. Those are the stations where it seems like there's an opportunity to capture the people who are coming through their day to day, even if you can't get residential built that close to it.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for sharing your insight and experience. It's much appreciated. So thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, we are going to transition to the affordable housing panel. Let me introduce the moderator and have everybody else come up. So our moderator is my friend Carmen Resnick. She's got a very long title. And I don't want to mess it up. It's the Program Manager of Development Services for Orange County's Real Estate Management Division. So prior to that, she has experience with the City of Orlando, with the Ackerman Law Firm, in the private sector with Velocity Red, and helped to develop and deliver Creative Village to the City of Orlando. Carmen and I have worked together both in the community as well as on a lot of ULI events, and she's always a joy to work with. And I'll turn it over to you to introduce your panel.
Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate it. So we have a great panel here today, and I want to go ahead and jump right in. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But before I do, I just want to position us really quickly for what we're looking at in terms of the housing crisis in Central Florida. And as Dory explained earlier when she opened up the conference, we've got 900 people per day moving to Florida. Most recently, the Florida Housing Coalition, they established that we are deficient by over 78,000 housing units that are 50% AMI. And most recently in 2022, the Coalition for the Homeless put out a statistic that established that 33% of the users coming through their property were first-time homelessness. And so if a lot of us that are working in this space, this feels really daunting. And I know that because I work in this space on a daily basis. But I'm joined by three gentlemen right here who are at the heart of the matter. They're in the trenches and they're digging every single day. So I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves really quickly, and then we're going to go ahead and jump right in with questions because we've already been teed up by the last two panels. So I want to get right to it. So Eddie, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Eddie Morton with Lift Orlando.
Eddie, you got to hold the microphone.
Thank you. This works better if I hold it up, doesn't it? So Lift Orlando is a new model for addressing some of these social challenges in our community. Basically, it's a place-based community development effort that gets business leaders to work together with residents and community partners for the goal of strengthening neighborhoods so people can thrive. For us, housing is one of many components that come together in strengthening a community, alongside with education, health and wellness, and long-term economic viability. The reality that so many of our communities weakened by a lack of infrastructure that represent a disproportionate amount of distress in our regions are concentrated in a small number of places. It's true here, it's true in any city that you visit. There's a handful of neighborhoods where most of the challenges lie, and that is not by accident. But these are man-made problems, so they can be man or woman undone. We do that in three different ways. We invest in the people who live in those communities, the folks who are willing to work hard to make their community healthier, stronger. These are the folks willing to fight and work to really collaborate, the volunteer homeowners associations, the Main Street initiatives, the neighborhood watch programs. The statistics show this may be the only explanation for the dramatic drop in crime over the last 40 years of the last century. There's no change in legislation or policing that produced that. But this reality has been growing about the same rate crime has been dropping. It's interesting, since COVID, these activities have shut down and crime is on an increase again. But even if you can do all of that for your community, trying to rebuild decades of dilapidated infrastructure is not something most neighborhoods can do. So we step in really investing in the places, whether that's housing, education, parks. How do we strengthen the environments where people live in and use partnerships to do that? Because these two factors are like oil and water. People who are willing to fight for their community don't trust people with money to change it, and the folks with the money to change it don't care for your opinion on how to spend it. So we work hard to bring folks together that otherwise wouldn't work together. One of our toughest problems in the city circa 2012 were these apartments on Orange Center, once a place of pride, but by then in the news about once or twice a month for the crime rate and terrible conditions people had to live in. Over time, and working together with the community collaborators like the city and so many others, really looked at providing a collaborative approach to solving these problems. It did not rely on a single developer or a single nonprofit to do that. And that's really all we do. It's a focused approach for hyper-local transformation to really turn what was one of our worst apartment communities into one of our best. And to date, this kind of culmination of a community campus, a walkable, connected approach to addressing not only housing, but using housing as a cornerstone for creating environments where people experience upward mobility. So these are our last 6 projects over the last 6 years, from 2 phases of mixed income multifamily housing, a Boys and Girls Club, an early learning center, our health and wellness center, and a brand new park in partnership with the city and our friends at Florida Citrus Sports. The goal basically is, how do we get all of our neighborhoods in the city to be the kinds of places where children grow up with hope and return with joy. I'm delighted that ULI is hosting not only this event, but this particular discussion. I think the idea of how we create more partnerships between the public and private sector. We've all met developers or been in conversations or have been ourselves in the position of complaining about the role of the public sector, the delay to cause more, the cost through time and complexity. And then there are a lot of folks in the public sector like to demonize developers and maybe make it their mission to figure out how to not let them make as much money as they could. But if we can work together, even across some of these and other divides, we can do things that are really creative and solve even bigger problems. Here you go, Russ.
I'm going to hand you that remote. Hi, my name is Russ Dagan. I am Senior Vice President of Resort Development for Universal Studios. So, of course, affordable housing is the first thing that comes to mind when you look at me up here. I'm a little bit outgunned today. I'm with experts in this industry. So if everyone could just do me a big favor and take a deep breath in and then lower your expectations just a little bit. Like I said, I'm Resort Development for Universal Studios. However, we developed a Housing for Tomorrow task force some time ago, 2019, I believe. And I was put in charge of searching the country, trying to find a developer that would help us develop 20 acres that we were donating to an affordable housing cause. This is not worker housing. This is not universal employment housing. This is community housing that we donated the land, and we're actually partnering with Wendover. So we've got a nonprofit that will be around in perpetuity to see to it that whatever we do develop there, or what we are developing, maintains a level of quality that we and Wendover will be proud of in years to come. It's also not a flip opportunity. This is affordable housing in perpetuity. So that was one of the things that we looked at on the private sector, where we said, we can do this, we can help the finances work, and in this partnership we were able to figure this out. We did do a nationwide search. We came back with, I think, 17 different companies. We shortlisted it to 5, one of which was Wendover, and then upon further review and education really on our part, it became abundantly clear that partnering with someone here in the state of Florida, the advantages that offered for the funding opportunities was something that became very, very important in this development. As you can see on the slide, 1,000 units that we're building. We're getting ready to break ground here very shortly. There's a lot of great things about the location that we're really excited about. And like I said, this is something that's new to us. But one of the things that we looked at on the task force early on was, listen, let's do everything we can to prove that it's viable, and let's try to shame every other private corporation into doing something similar. That we were trying to be the beta test for a good reason, and we have every reason to believe it's going to pencil out.
You made a good choice in your partner, so thank you very much for that. It's much appreciated. Ryan Von Weller with Wendover Housing Partners. I'm the COO of the company. So as Russ mentioned, this particular site had some challenges on it. It's a site that Universal had owned for quite some time, in very close proximity to Epic Universe and to some other major areas that you all are familiar with, kind of in the iDrive corridor. In that particular 2 or 3 mile radius from this site, we're bringing in, not me, but 100,000 workers are coming in daily into the iDrive corridor, service workers, hospitality workers, et cetera. And when we started doing research on this after we were fortunate enough to win the award, we started to find that the demographic of people coming into this were not only some of the lowest income levels, but also traveling the furthest to get there. So you have people coming in 2-3 hour Lynx rides to work a minimum wage job, both directions. Now that doesn't pencil out in terms of quality of life. So ultimately, once we were able to procure this project with Universal's team and spend a year with our attorneys working through that, we were able to finally get to Florida Housing and some other of our organizations we deal with for affordable housing. Quickly, they identified this is ground zero in the state of Florida for the lack of affordable product type for any type of housing, affordable and workforce. So with their buy-in, we were able to start configuring what this particular project may look like overall. So what we ended up with was kind of first a mandate to almost develop 1,000 units across the 20 acres, which at 50 units an acre, I know some of you in here work in South Florida, different areas of the state of Florida. 50 units an acre is very dense for a lot of Central Florida, especially for greenfield sites, particularly when you're not going to go up, 8-9 stories across the entire site. So this is kind of a hybrid of pretty much every building type known to man in the construction industry. We were able to get 1,000 units on this site in addition to Jeff Bezos' Academy Montessori preschool, which will provide free preschool education, not only to residents, but also to the area people as well, and including workers along the I-Drive corridor. We've got a community health center branch here, which will take up about 12,000 square feet, providing health care to people with insurance, indigent folks as well that can't afford insurance and afford health care. So that's a big component of it as well. There'll eventually be a grocery store in sight here. Lots of educational opportunities with UCF and Orange County Public Schools. So we really tried to create a sense of community this is what we call a day in the life. So when someone wakes up here in the morning, when their kids go to school, when they go to work, to the time they get home and go to sleep, everything can be encapsulated inside this 20-acre community, which was a real challenge. But with our partners at Universal, who have been just tremendous in their assistance in this, and again, they're not getting paid to help with this. They donated the land, which was kind enough, which was a big reason this all pencils out and all works. But their staff, including Russ and some of the other guys that work with us, don't do this on a daily basis, but they've made themselves available to what we need and assist in this overall process, which has been tremendous, both with Orange County and with several of our trades as well. Is that the end of the slow? Oh, might be the end of the show there. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. So I'm going to jump right into some of the more meatier content of our questions, because I really want the folks in the audience to understand that these real estate deals are not your traditional real estate deals by any means, whether it's design, market study, finance, et cetera, et cetera. These are financial beasts. And if one leg of that comes undone, the whole project can come undone. So could you just describe what the financial structure of one of these real estate deals looks like, and how does your team navigate that landscape to ensure that this happens?
Yeah, I see I've got 19 minutes left. This could take 6 hours. But in general, you can't build and operate affordable housing without a government subsidy is kind of a very generic term for it. But mostly it's the tax credit, it's bonding authority, it's soft money from the local or state government that has a very low or 0% interest rate. In addition to that, you've got all sorts of just other sources and different things you can kind of compile and put together in order to make it work and make it jive. We can't raise the rents higher than what HUD tells us we can raise them to annually. So if we have an increase in insurance, we have an increase in building costs, those things are all impossible for us to navigate. There is no way for us to adjust on the fly and to make these projects still pencil. So by the time we break ground on a development such as this, which is at a much larger scale than we typically see, you have to have the entire thing cooked. And there is no way to come back and reassess and rebuild to do that after you've already started the project. So it's a very big challenge, but it's something that if you're in this industry, you're adept at doing it if you're going to be successful.
I would throw out there that I had a son that was applying to college at the same time we were doing all this, and the college scholarship programs are a lot like this. You're trying to check every box you possibly can to say, okay, now we now qualify for this one, and do you have an aunt that works in the floral industry? Yes, figure out how to check that box, and suddenly you're eligible for whatever it is. This seemed to be running parallel with my personal life the whole time these guys were educating me on what we're doing.
I think it's hard for folks who haven't been part of one of these deals to imagine the complexity and all the reasons why we don't build more of these. It costs the same, but you have to do so much more work to figure out how to make it pencil out and be creative to make that stack come together.
So we don't have 6 hours, but in the abridged version, what can local governments do to channel resources to assist developers with these gap financing issues and needs that occur during these development projects?
So there's a variety of tools out there. For instance, Orange County has been at the forefront of having a trust fund for the better part of 3 or 4 years now, and they've allocated, I think, 2 rounds of funding, somewhere around $10 to $15 million a year to help fill the gap. What's really come online in the last couple months is Senator Pasadomo, who is the Senate President in Tallahassee, has introduced transformative legislation, Senate Bill 102, which will be matched by the House and approved in the next couple weeks with a few minor tweaks that we need to have done. What that bill is doing is creating revenue streams that used to go to general revenue and allocating them for affordable housing. So there's going to be recurring funds annually that used to go to that from a corporate tax level. There's also going to be one-time funds allocated to fill the gap on projects that are currently stuck So if you have a $5-6 million bust in your project, you'll be able to apply to get some of this $100 million plus allocations coming down from there as well. In addition to ad valorem tax breaks, sales tax breaks, et cetera, and some more leverage that the local governments can have. So when you put all those tools together, for us, all those things become financing tools. It's a little bit atypical from what a lot of market rate developers are used to doing, but we're able to use those breaks, those credits, as a part of our overall capital stack.
Yeah, it is very exciting. I think it's wonderful to see the kind of leadership that we're seeing coming out of Pasadomo's office in the state of Florida and Tallahassee to really move forward on doing something that's not just trying to repair the ways in which we haven't performed in the past, to really bring about new ideas. I think the opportunity to follow the leadership of the county and really look at, hey, this is the total number we know is a gap for our area. How do we calculate what we can do, and whether that's our local governments? I think the combination of more leadership from the private sector, Universal is such a fantastic example, even our philanthropic community. If you care about the well-being and the strength of our region, this is a critical foundational issue. You heard some of the numbers on homelessness. We all have a role to play in this, and the more of us, whether you're on the development side, on the funding side, that understand that priority and dare to have those conversations, the more we can drive innovation and creativity to be part of the solution.
Thank you. So, as we all know, governments are ginormous institutions, and we don't move as fast as you guys. We try sometimes, but we don't move as fast. So with something like Senate Bill 102 coming up, what do you guys have in terms of advice for local governments to really synthesize on the uptake to ensure that we're ready to go when some of this legislation actually comes into action?
You know, Orange County is a little different than a lot of other areas of the state in terms of their advanced knowledge of affordable housing and the processes that need to accompany not everything from the financing up front to the permitting and expediting that and making all these things come together in a streamlined fashion. One of the big things that the Senate bill allows is for local governments in the state of Florida, it's almost a mandate that they're going to have to allow commercial and industrial properties to allow for affordable housing without a land use change or a zoning change. So how governments adapt to that in the short term is really going to drive the availability of affordable land for us to build on for the next couple of years. Now, there'll probably be some artificial deadline put in place that a lot of governments won't meet, but we're very hopeful that people take that to heart at the municipal level and start planning for that now.
I would throw in, I think Orange County, from a permit review and just reviews, we're getting the attention we need. And I think, listen, we're a big player in both Orange County and the city of Orlando. But normally a project like this probably wouldn't get the attention that it deserves. And I think that's something that we can all do. I mean, just development in general. If you're looking for a reason to stop from a municipality standpoint, you can usually find one. This is the opposite. We're looking for reasons to go forward. And when you've got your mayors saying this is important to us, and this is something that's pretty unifying. I think everyone agrees this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and because of that, it's getting a lot of the attention it deserves.
I think more leadership around defining the problem and what aspect of it we want to tackle. Like, we can talk too often about the housing crisis as some big generality, when so much of it is a supply and demand issue that maybe any one particular group or collection would be able to solve. But tackling specific sectors of it that do feel like this is our civic responsibility, that people who work hard full-time to provide for their families probably shouldn't be living out of their cars. And so how do the industries and sectors that employ large swaths, I mean, this is why I get so excited about Universal's example here. We need more corporate leadership to say, like, hey, our industry, we can lead the way, we can provide ways for more of our folks to benefit from the investments we make in the community. And then what are the places, what are the parts of town where, again, investment would not otherwise spontaneously show up there. But we can prioritize those places where we have more vulnerable families, where you might be able to develop with more public support, subsidies, and tax credits that make it feasible to do it there. And the more local communities have done the work to prioritize those places and be prepared to incentivize opportunities there, the faster we'll take advantage of these other opportunities.
Thank you. So with Senate Bill 102 and even HB 1339 last year, a lot of the properties that are coming forward, some of them being in industrial areas, those are going to bring their own challenges financially, logistically, in terms of design. So what do you guys think that local governments and organizations can do to help you guys navigate any challenges that are associated around substandard or non-conforming lots as this development goes forward?
we've started looking for industrial properties. Now, it can't, for us, I mean, heavy industrial next to residential is not necessarily a great fit, right? But transitional industrial, light commercial, those kind of things are. Mixed use is inclusive in that mix as well. So we've already run across several sites that have had industrial areas open and haven't been sold for 20 years, but a part of their, not an HOA, but organization that manages the actual industrial park is saying, you can't build multifamily here. I don't care what the law says or how it changes. That's the challenge we're seeing currently. So I don't know how that's going to play when it comes to the municipality versus the local agencies and local control boards, but that's something that we're seeing right now already.
Russ, I do appreciate your perspective because it does kind of pull us out of the minutia. The few of us sitting up here that are in development on a daily basis. And when we were doing our call, you said something that I thought was really impactful. And it's something that me working in local government, I think I always strive to do, but sometimes can get caught, in the blinders a lot. So can you tell us what you feel like local governments could do to drive housing to areas that are in need?
Well, I'll be honest, I don't remember that part of the conversation. So
it was a few months ago. It's okay.
Look, I think it's about being open. I mean, I don't look at the governments as, I never look at the government as being the entity that's going to solve our problems. I mean, it's elected officials. It's oftentimes not their day job, and it's about the community addressing the need. And I really think the private sector is I mean, it's where the money is. So I think that's where you're going to find the solutions. I mean, you're a perfect example of that. What Eddie's doing with everyone in the community, pulling things together to make things happen. I think that's really what it comes down to. We're able to do it because we're a bigger company, and we're partnered with some real talent. But I really think that it's that kind of grassroots thing. And listen, I'd like to say that this is that we're the most benevolent organization in the world, and yes, we are. But the reality of it is it's going to impact everything if it doesn't get addressed. We're not going to have the workforce that we need, and no one in town is going to be able to get the resources we need. The quality of the services here in Orlando are going to decline if we don't do something about this. And we've all seen it. I mean, everyone here is involved in development in one way, shape, or form. We don't see the subcontractor trades we're looking for. We don't get coverage on bids the way we used to. There's a number of things that need to be addressed, and it's all going to manifest itself in housing if we don't do something.
I think there is this acknowledgement of the unique contribution that our leaders in the public sector can bring to this. It's really understanding the forces at work in a community and providing a guiding hand for what things we incentivize, what things we facilitate, and what things we rightfully do slow down or obstruct. And I think getting in the game with regard to that, I agree we need the private sector to step up and provide leadership, provide often cover for our public leaders to feel like they're standing behind something that has a chance to succeed and is not going to blow up in their faces. But you see a lot of the passion in the staff of our public sector organizations wanting to be part of the solution, wanting to think out of the box, but not having enough real viable solutions come to them. And so I think it's a matter of what kind of roles we play and how we set expectations. We could take for granted, I think we talked about this not so long ago, that we've been such a fast-growing place for so long, and it feels really, really good. And it can also feel like that's going to last forever. But there are places all over the Rust Belt, the Midwest, the Northeast, that once were boom towns, and people thought it was going to be like that forever. And that was just 100 years ago. And they're ghost towns today in some cases. And I think for us to realize this is our moment in time, and you heard it said earlier, and I believe it's true, jobs follow the people, and we've got the people coming. And so with this kind of economic opportunity and growth pace, how do we take advantage of it and think outside of the box, come up with ideas that are good for the community and good for business, and then seek to bring others alongside to do that? And I think we're blessed that we have public leaders that want to get behind those sort of things. We just have to work together and not presume an adversarial dynamic when we go into those spaces.
Ryan, anything to add?
No, I think that's all exactly on point. One of the main things that we see a lack of, for lack of a better way to describe it, is political courage. Like, we show up with an affordable housing development, I'm sure Eddie's seen this as well, Sometimes you don't have the support of the local government, right? So they tell you in the newspaper, they're quoted in saying, we don't have affordable housing, I can't house my workforce. I say, I got money, I have a site in your town. They say, not here. Okay, so that's a real problem. And to be able to overcome that is something that is a challenge for all of us in this community, right? It's a development issue, it's an electoral issue, it's across the board. And you would think in today's world, especially when we're having an entire symposium here on the problem we're having, that we would all be able to come to the conclusion that we should maybe support this and try to work forward through it. But we don't. So we're mired in lawsuits against all sorts of things constantly that just delay the deliverables. We ultimately win, but it just slows everything down, makes it more complex. So to have the elected officials buy in, and when it comes down to the vote, being the third vote that says yes is just absolutely paramount to what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. So the developments that your groups are tackling are not just apartments. You've got other facilities, you've got other resources that are on site along with the housing. Can you walk me through really quickly the intentionality that it takes when you're in the development process to include those assets so that your development is self-sustaining and it's not just disconnected?
The Catchlight project with Universal is a bit of a different animal than what we typically do. So when we typically build 80 to 120 affordable housing units, which is about the size you're going to get with any single allocation, you're including amenities for the residents, pools, clubhouses, potentially a food pantry, things like that. But you're not really providing commercial components inside there. It's not typically a mixed-use development. Now, some of theirs are. They do it at a different kind of scope and scale. Their mission is a bit different than we are as a strictly affordable housing developer. But when we look at Catchlight, including all these different components becomes a challenge because you can't use tax credits and affordable housing financing to build a health center or a grocer. So you start building condos on top of condos, and some of my attorneys might be in there now that I work with, but it just becomes a multi-leveled approach, and it just creates a whole bunch of different headaches. But you have to do it because you know that your residents need those services, and it's just absolutely critical to provide them for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's a missional thing. We would be working like we have with a developer like Wendover and say, okay, well, how do we help make those things possible? Because that's not your work. And how do we bring together the partners to fund that, to build it, to think creatively about it? I think it was Richard Florida who wrote The Rise of the Creative Class 20-some years ago, right? And talked about attracting the right people so they could get the right industries and see economic growth. He wrote a follow-up just a few years ago called A New Urban Crisis. And he said, I was right. Getting talented people into your cities brings great economic growth. It also is an accelerant to inequality. That as the community grows and prospers, the most vulnerable places become poorer and larger portions of the workforce get left behind. And so for us, thinking holistically, even if it really requires a lot of partnership and thinking out of the box, is a way to mitigate that so that the growth actually equals opportunity for everybody.
I was just going to add that, you know, the affordable or the attainable can have a stigma to it if you don't look into what it really is. And that's kind of eye-opening. If you look at the product is ridiculously compelling. And what we're developing is a community that anyone here would be proud to live in. And there's still this idea that, you know, when I mean, listen, I have good friends who I said, you know, I'm working on this new initiative. It's an attainable housing. And it was, and I refer to everything I work on as a project, but all they heard was projects. And that's not what we're talking about. And there's still that stigma out there. And I'm sure, you know, some of the communities that Wendover tries to go in, it's educating, you know, the city officials that no, this is what it is. And you know, the affordable unit is right next to a market rate unit, and it's the exact same product. And that's what I think is lost on a lot of people. One of the things I'm really proud of that we've done at Universal with our hotels, a little bit of plug, is that we don't talk down to our guests. That if you're at our most affordable or you know property, it's still a very, very compelling property. And once we started talking to Wendover, it was the same thing. It's no, this is the bar we set, and you know we kind of challenged each other to go back and forth. Well, what if we did this? What if we did this? And just tried to raise that bar. I think that's really important with the product.
Thank you, guys. I have one final question, so no holds barred. This is going to be a fun question. If you guys could shape housing development in our region, what is one way that you would approach this task? And dream big. There's no rules. Go.
You said to change I couldn't hear, I'm sorry.
If you could change the shape of housing development in our region.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. I think what's happened recently, and I think it's been touched on already today by some of the other panelists, is that we have a lack of all housing product here. What happened in 2020 set everybody back for several months, and it seems like it took 2 years to recover. So even though we just took a quick pause, the lumber industry went crazy, home builders may have stopped for 60 days, and that set everything back. So, what I would like to see is faster permitting, obviously lower commodity pricing, and then the ability for all sectors to be able to move quicker through the development cycle and deliver product more efficiently.
You make me go now? I like the idea of speed as well. I was thinking that earlier, that private sector, public sector, we know who moves quicker. So I like the idea of speed. I really like the sense of community. If there's something we could do to have it all woven in amongst each other, that would be amazing to me. So that there's certain school districts in town where the kids are still walking to school every day, and it's not a big busing community or whatever. So the idea of a walkable community that's all interwoven. I mean, I'm designing utopia or whatever in my head right now, but something that's much more interwoven, and so that it's not this pocket, so that it all becomes one.
I love about our community that when we set our minds to do something, we pretty much prove to be unstoppable. And I would love to see a shared vision where we all kind of are speaking the same language, singing off the same song sheet, that we're going to solve this problem and this is how we're going to solve it. Each one of you being advocates for this kind of thinking, for a lot of our leaders in the public or private sector or independent sector, success is about finding the parade and getting in front of it. And I think if we became a unified parade around what we could do here, we'll find a lot of leaders able to step in and remove obstacles.
Thank you, gentlemen. This has been incredible. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Well, I think this conference is throwing out the idea of Florida man. We have a lot of smart people in Florida, don't we? So I'm a native. How many people in the room are too, right? It took decades for us to get luxury resorts and hotels here, right? Well, the next panel is just about that. We have some of the neatest, coolest luxury resorts coming here. We have some great ones that are already here. So I'd like to introduce our moderator, Daniel Williams. He's with PCL, and he touches about every large hospitality, entertainment, and commercial project here in town. And I'm proud to say, as all of us in ULI are, he's one of the first graduates from our Real Estate Diversity Initiative. So Daniel, thank you. Take it away.
Thank you, Dory. Good afternoon. We'll have the panelists come on up. So since the arrival of Disney in 1971, Orlando has been seen by the casual observer as an economy destination for families. However, since the year 2010, there's been an almost 200% increase in the number of luxury resort and hotel rooms in the region. Today's panel will help us understand what is making Central Florida attractive to luxury hospitality projects and give us insights into the future of this market. Our panelists today are Brian Thrush, Vice President of Capital Expenditure for Host Hotels. Host Hotels is the nation's largest lodging real estate investment trust and one of the largest owners of luxury and upper upscale hotels. The company currently owns 78 properties in the U.S. and internationally, totaling approximately 42,200 rooms. We also have Tom Cunningham. Tom's the CEO and president of Development Ventures Group. The Devon Group focuses on the development and ownership of high-quality real estate assets, relying on a deep analytical approach to investing and an enduring commitment to integrity in all of their dealings. They're responsible for such projects as the Bonnet Creek Resort, the Henry in Tampa, and the upcoming Fairmont Orlando project. And last, we've got Stuart Brown, Executive Vice President at Dart Interests. As Executive Vice President of Hospitality for Dart Interests, Stuart leads the operations and strategy of hospitality investments, including Evermore Resort, an innovative resort community being developed in Orlando. Stuart previously worked with Xenia Hotels and Resorts, where he managed the firm's West Coast portfolio. Prior to that, Stuart was responsible for growing and running the asset management business line in the Caribbean and Latin America for JLL's Hotel and Hospitality Group. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. All right, so we'll jump right in. Brian, we'll start with you. In 2021, Host acquired the Four Seasons Resort Orlando at Walt Disney World for $610 million. What goes into the Host decision to acquire properties, and why was this a particular interest to Host?
Well, I think first of all, at Host, we look for iconic and irreplaceable assets. We have a very strong balance sheet, so we have the ability to buy whatever we choose to buy. So we have that flexibility, of course. We look for iconic and irreplaceable. If you look at some of our recent purchases, Four Seasons Jackson Hole, the 1 Hotel South Beach, we bought the Alila Ventana Big Sur. So we're looking for high RevPAR properties. We like luxury. The luxury space, we feel like there's a solid room for growth in the luxury space. And when you look at Orlando, it's a somewhat limited supply of luxury. We've got our neighbor here coming next door to us at the Four Seasons, but it's still a limited supply. And I think at the end of the day, it's Disney. So the Four Seasons was an opportunity that presented itself that we could be part of the ownership of the hotel, close to Disney. Wealthy people like to have grandkids and kids that love Disney. They love Disney. They love to have that experience. They love the close proximity to the parks and the concierge services that between us and Disney we can offer them. So it was a very attractive asset for us, and it's done extremely well since we purchased it about 2 years ago.
Perfect. Tom, the Devon Group announced the Fairmont Orlando project slated to begin construction this year with a projected opening in 2025. This will be the brand's 20th property in the U.S. For those unfamiliar with the Fairmont brand, can you share with us some of the exciting aspects of this development and why Central Florida is uniquely positioned to be the latest location for this prestigious brand?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, and thanks for having me on the panel. In a little, just quick intro, a little bit on Devon. Hospitality is one aspect of our business. We also, and I was telling Brian when I walked up here, this is a hard panel to follow after the great work that the previous panel was doing. And I view our luxury portfolio as and focus as kind of a wealth distribution. We take from the luxury customers and pass it down. So, the big opportunity here really is a job creation opportunity. So, if you look at the Fairmont, we'll create close over 1,000 jobs. These two guys, Stu's far eclipsing that with what he's doing, and we really are looking forward to one. I agree with Brian. The luxury market in Orlando is underserved. There's about 4.8% of luxury rooms in this market compared to 8% nationally in the top 10 markets. And so, the opportunity to bring another luxury brand, there's only a few left from our vantage point, was really what helped us pick Fairmont as a luxury opportunity. Accor has really transitioned. They're one of the largest operators internationally that we've worked with through our parent company, and they've really positioned the Accor brand in North America and shifted from a primarily mid-scale extended stay brand in Europe to a luxury asset portfolio. So we're excited to be part of that. I apologize I wasn't able to share any pictures with you. My legal team would not let me share anything at this point, but we're excited about that. We're excited about luxury in Orlando. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Stuart, so the Evermore Resort is scheduled to open later this year. What made this the right place for that resort?
Yeah, we are very excited that we'll open in December. It's actually interesting, the panel, we have a 2-break ground up and operating, and we are what I like to call full boil in construction right now. And when I first was interviewed to work at DART, I made the guy who was interviewing me tell me the story about Grand Cypress and Evermore about 5 times because I just couldn't believe it. Evermore is sort of a reimagination of the old Grand Cypress resort. And being a carpetbagger, I would always kind of explain to people, hey, here's where it is, here's where it's located. It's what was known as Grand Cypress. And they're like, oh, you should have just started with that. Everyone knows where Grand Cypress is. But DART acquired that land. It's basically everything in that PD except for the Hyatt Grand Cypress, which is owned by our neighbors here, Xenia Hotels and Resorts. So it's about 1,500 acres, and it had about 146 hotels on it and 45 holes of golf. And DART identified that as just untapped potential right in the heart of the tourist corridor here in Orlando. DART's very bullish on Florida and on Orlando, as well as in Texas. Our headquarters is actually in Texas, here in the US. So it sort of gave us a bit of a blank slate from which to launch an operating platform. It was one of the earliest sort of seed investments that the group made. And so that basically allowed us to analyze the market, assess what could be built there. And this was actually pre-me. I mean, I maybe should let Tom tell this part because he was at DART at that time. But essentially, after sort of looking at the market, we identified an opportunity to build a luxury positioned integrated resort. So that entails a luxury branded Conrad hotel. And then we sort of have a unique business model where we're doing vacation rental, but it's all going to be resort owned and operated. And so what we think that does is it allows for sort of the inconsistency that you normally get in a vacation rental. We can eliminate that because we control every aspect of the product, from how it's designed, how it's built, all the interiors, all the appliances, and how it's serviced. So it sort of operates closer to like the way a hotel would be operated, but it is run on a vacation rental model. Okay. So, and then that allowed us also to sort of seed here in Orlando, sort of our center for future development throughout the state.
Okay, so for that vacation rental component, do you see that also being a luxury segment that is targeted as well?
Yeah, the whole resort will be is targeted at the luxury guest. It's a bit of a misnomer in hotel speak. All the classifications of hotels are fairly well defined. In the vacation rental world, it's not as easy to define those standards because the units are all owned by millions of people, right? So one of the things we think we're doing is we're kind of setting the luxury standard, I would say, for vacation rental. As an example, we have sprinkler systems. We have all of our interiors are being designed by a hospitality interior designer, actually the same designer who's designing parts of the Conrad Hotel. So we're sort of setting a luxury bar, and then it's all within this big resort complex, right? So the vacation rental guests, of course, can go to the signature restaurant at the Conrad and enjoy, a fine dining Mexican meal, and then vice versa. People from the hotel can come and enjoy our Crystal Lagoon and all the activities around the resort.
Thank you. So Brian, looking at the host business model, what are some other ways in which you look to repurpose and reposition a project once you acquire it?
I think we're not ground up developers. We're not developers in that we don't go out and find land and in a new location and develop ourselves. We're long-term holders of real estate, being a REIT. So what we do look for are development opportunities and repositioning opportunities within our portfolio. So we look for things at what we call value creation, and that's my main role and my main focus is through these value add projects. They can range anywhere from, we have the Marriott Orlando World Center here. We have the two of the largest ballrooms in Central Florida. But we couldn't book both ballrooms with 2 large groups at the same time because we didn't have enough feed space and breakout meeting space. So we added a 60,000 square foot meeting space expansion to the front of the hotel. We had to relocate one of the golf holes, retool that, and relocate the entry drive in order to do that, but it gives us the ability to sell 2 large groups. So by doing that, we've now created a lot more revenue out of that, and we've created more value for that asset. We also built the water park there in an area that had an adult pool that you could say it was an adult pool. If you went there, you would be hard pressed to find an adult or a kid. It was kind of in an out of the way area, but we have a water park with 3 water slides and a lazy river, and that enabled us to put a little bump into the resort fee there and generate revenue. So those are examples, local examples here of how we've done that. Ritz Naples, you mentioned that earlier. That's one of my big concerns right now. Ritz Naples is a property that was top of our portfolio, one of our top performers, the top performer many years. But we also saw now there's some functional obsolescence in that property. We didn't have enough deck space for the pools. So, people would come down at 7 in the morning and try to stake out their chaise lounges, and sometimes that gets a little dicey. We didn't have enough that deck space. We didn't have enough suites. We had 9% suites, and we had the ability to take our entitlements of 474 rooms, create more suites out of some of our existing rooms, and then create unit count to add a new tower. So we added a new tower with 74 premium rooms to that. So it's a big and it was a little bit of a challenge to convince our board that why are we going to mess with the golden goose? But there was more value to be created there. So we look for opportunities. Another example of opportunities that we look for, what we call repositioning a property, and we've done that similarly outside of Florida. The Phoenician in Scottsdale was one of our examples a few years ago that we did the same thing. I think. Since you're the moderator here, is your PCL added a 19-unit villa building in Maui for us, but it was part of an acquisition that had entitlements for one last building, and the entitlements were about to expire. So we took advantage of that, and of course the performance there is I think we've outperformed our initial underwriting within the first 6 months since that opened. So those are the kind of things we look for, value add. Sometimes it's ground up development, sometimes it's repositioning a current asset or adding amenities.
Okay, thank you. And you alluded to this, and so I'll go ahead and ask the question now. So 2022, Hurricane Ian comes through Florida, and it significantly impacted several communities in the state. Were any of the host products impacted by the hurricane? And is Host doing anything with their coastal investments for climate resiliency?
Okay, so that I need a few hours on, I think. I think we have 12 properties in Florida, so we like Florida. But along with Florida comes, of course, some risk with hurricanes. So with Hurricane Ian, we had 2 properties in particular. Ritz Naples is really the one that got hit hardest. So when that storm came up the Gulf Coast and then stopped and then turned inland, it hit Ritz Naples with storm surge, and it hit our Hyatt Coconut Point with wind and storm surge. So Ritz Naples really bore the brunt of this. So all of our, basically it's a hotel without a brain at this point. All of the systems that operate the hotel were in the beach level. So we had 6 feet of storm surge that flooded the lowest level of the hotel, which took out everything: electrical switchgear, fire alarm control panel, elevator panels, all the central plant, all the chillers, boilers, laundry equipment, you name it, everything that runs the hotel. So we're now in a rebuild, but part of our thinking on this was we're now building we're taking the major equipment, we're going to build an extension onto the back of the building so that we can elevate that above the floodplain so that we don't have to experience this again. So we're going to move electrical switchgear, a new central plant essentially. We're going to elevate that. So we're looking at doing that. It also caused us to step back and say, okay, hey, what about the rest of our portfolio? We have a property in Miami that's right on the water. So we have several properties like that. We're looking at that, say, okay, from a resiliency standpoint, what do we need to look at to protect ourselves from something like this in the future? So we are actively looking at that, and we have there'll probably be some future projects as a result of that.
Do you mind if I ask a question of Brian?
Yes.
Okay. Just in thinking about the hurricane and all the storm damage in the Southwest, as group business kind of starts to rebuild, are you seeing any of that demand that maybe would have gone to the Ritz, as an example, going to other properties within Florida?
Yeah, we're trying desperately to hang on to that. And it's been a little hard convincing some people because groups, they're thinking 6 months out in advance. So the hotel's closed right now. We're planning on reopening in mid-year. So anybody who's got an event planned this year is probably weekly. There's certain groups that are probably calling our property weekly to find out what our status is and can we guarantee that we're going to be ready for them. So there is a lot of that. One of the good things about the asset in Ritz Naples is it's from a group standpoint. We have a lot of legacy groups that have come back there for year after year after year. So we really, really want to keep that business. They enjoy our property, and we certainly enjoy having them. So it is a challenge. The other thing that we do have in our favor is that we also own the other Ritz-Carlton in Naples at Tiburon. So we do have the ability to accommodate certain groups at Tiburon. So we try to keep that captured there as best as we can.
Thank you. Tom, can you explain to us Devon Group's business model and how that's being affected by the current financial markets and interest rates?
Yeah, that's a big question. Particularly in the hospitality space, we got hammered by COVID first, and then uncertainty in the capital markets, then interest rate rises, then Daniel, your fine company just passing on the continual cost escalations as we were going through that process. So it's been a challenge, to say the least. And I think it has made us continually rethink our business model in raising equity, where we're getting capital from. I mean, anecdotally, we do, besides hospitality, these guys are really the hospitality experts. We do student housing and urban mixed use as well. We've got relationships with large money center banks and lenders. And doing a mixed use urban project in Denver was an easy conversation. Doing a luxury hotel in Orlando in 2021 was not as easy of a conversation. But then year-end 2021 came through, in large part to Brian and his performance in the other luxury segment in Orlando. All of a sudden, lenders are calling us back saying, are you still working on that project? We'd love to have a shot at that opportunity. So, there's clearly some fickleness in the capital markets that has been challenging. And we rely significantly on our parent company. We're owned by Kojima Corp, a multinational construction and development company. So the ability to have that footing has given us access to alternative capital sources, variety of international capital sources in order to capitalize the projects.
Thank you. Stuart, can you talk to us a little bit about occupancies at hotels and resorts? I mean, have they returned to pre-pandemic levels? Have they exceeded pre-pandemic levels? And how do they differ for luxury products as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the downturn in demand during the pandemic was unlike anything since modern record keeping has been around. The luxury segment in Orlando in April of 2020 was 4%, and it was 8% nationwide. So literally, demand just absolutely, completely eviscerated. Fast forward, we had 2022 was a pretty stellar year in terms of demand and market dynamics. I was actually, if you're a nerd like me, you listen to earnings calls. I was just learning to these guys' earnings call, host's earnings call, and they called out that the Four Seasons transient rate, which is essentially the leisure rate, I would call it for this audience, in Q4 was $2,000 a night. That's the price you pay for a hotel room at the Four Seasons in Q4. So demand has come back absolutely with a vengeance. Interestingly, it's not back to where it was pre-pandemic in terms of occupancy in any segment, or it wasn't at year-end 2022. And a lot of that's because the business transient, so the corporate person in a suit, traveling around for work, and the group segment have not really returned back to pre-pandemic. Leisure has been very, very strong. But on a blended rate, we're still a little bit below where we were pre-pandemic in terms of occupancy. But the interesting story is more on the ADR and the RevPAR, where we have a little bit of a sort of a barbell or a barbell situation where you have luxury has done quite a bit better. And so luxury rates are about 21% above where they were pre-pandemic. And then RevPAR overall is about 12% above where we were pre-pandemic. I'm a little cheat sheet here. And then for all segments, still a little bit below in occupancy, and about 8% above in RevPAR. So the other component that's doing well is actually the economy and upper mid-scale chains as well. So both of those segments have done quite well, pushing rate and exceeding pre-pandemic levels. Now remember, inflation, so we're still, in real terms, we're still on par and maybe even a little bit below in terms of RevPAR. But those two segments have done a lot better than the market, sort of in the middle.
Thank you. So if I hear you correctly, it sounds like volume may be down, but profitability is up. And a component of that is inflation.
Exactly. The rates are up. I mean, another reason that profitability is up, and this is sort of one of the things that I'm sure you guys are looking at as well, more of the ongoing operating assets. But, pricing came back with a vengeance, and we were charging more than we've ever charged our guests. However, staffing levels still very low. In December, the hospitality, leisure and hospitality industry was about a million jobs short of where we were just prior to the pandemic in February. So we still have a ways to go, on a 17 million, employee base. So we still have a ways to go to bring back people into our industry. And you're charging these high rates, and you're therefore not allowed to, or you're not able to offer all the services you normally would. So that's kind of the struggle right now, and investors maybe loved it, short term, it's a great thing because you take out that labor cost, man, those margins got really fat. But we really need to bring back those labor components, especially in the luxury segment, where that's a lot of what you're paying for, is that high touch service. And so it's a struggle for our industry to really attract those people back. People like working at home, they don't want to come in. And it's incumbent on us just to make it, offer a good wage, offer good health benefits, help them with housing. We talked about that before. That's a real struggle for people. But also just make it a fun atmosphere and somewhere where people want to come for a career and not just a fallback job.
Okay, Tom, final question. What do you think will be surprising in the coming years for the luxury hospitality market?
I think one thing we considered with the Fairmont is, I think we're the first luxury product in town without a golf course. So that's a surprise. I didn't expect to see that. I think we've seen the decline in golf. We are going to send them to you, Steve. That's part of why we made that decision. So I think you're going to see that. I think there's, I don't think it's surprising, is probably not the right word. I think the consumer and the guest is just getting more and more sophisticated in what they expect. And so, to Stu's point, providing that level of service and that experience for the customer is going to continue to grow. So how do you, we're seeing it in all aspects of the offering. How do you really create that customized experience for the guest? How do you make them feel like they're the most important guest on that property? Is going to be I think we're going to continue to see ways that we're doing that. Technology continues to obviously infiltrate the space. It's a lot easier to get in and out of your room. In a lot of ways, you can have the experience of not interacting with anybody at the hotel or getting as much service as you want, right? So I think you're going to start to see customization in that. And I think, you know, we're getting pressure from the upper upscale market that's also trying to serve that customer and cater to that customer. So it's going to be a continual challenge to differentiate the luxury segment from the rest of the hospitality offering.
Stuart, similar question. What do you think are some of the most important developments and trends to pay attention to?
Well, I mean, it's a cyclical business, so there's all sorts of sort of macro environment things, obviously, that we're following. I think the nuts and bolts of getting labor, you know, back on track is important. And then it's, you know, a lot of it's kind of sorting through what's here to stay, and especially if there's a big investment on the part of the developer or the owner up front. Hey, how much of this is a fad? You know, what's a fad and what's here to stay? You know, the combining of business and leisure trips as an example. They call it bleisure, which is, I think, a horrible name, but I guess it gets the point across. But is that here to stay, or is that something that was kind of a flash in the pan, you know, during COVID? You know, there's a huge push now with guests wanting, you know, more authentic and socially responsible experiences. So how do we partner them up with local organizations where they can have, you know, their group can do a service outing in the afternoon. You know, all the ESG demands that groups now make. You know, you really have to be on top of your game in terms of ESG, because they will just absolutely cross you off the list if you don't meet some of their requirements. So those are trends that are probably here to stay. So that's kind of what we're watching.
Okay. And Brian, last question for you. In December of last year, a Growth Spot article mentioned that plans had been filed to bring a condo-like multifamily units to the Orlando Four Seasons Resort. Is there anything you can share with us about that potential development? And what do you see next in Central Florida's luxury hospitality market?
Interesting. Tell me about that. Let's see. I can't say a whole lot about that. I think if you look at our acquisition, there's a parcel that goes along with that that's part of the remaining piece of the entitled piece of the Golden Oak development. So there's an opportunity there that we're looking at the feasibility of right now. Not announced, not approved, something we're kicking the tires on. I think, you know, you had talked about trends. I think the luxury residential, branded luxury residential is still a very strong trend, particularly here in Florida, not just Orlando, but all over Florida. So still see a lot of that. There's still a lot of wealth out there that's looking for that level, looking for the luxury level of not only just product, but the service element that goes along with it.
And the great location as well.
Yeah, and a great location, all of them, yeah. I mean, a lot of them, you know, we've got unique here in Central Florida. We've got the parks, you've got Disney, and you've got Universal, and you've got SeaWorld. So it's you've got that draw here that you don't have in a lot of different areas of the country, and then you also have the coast, and so it's still a big draw. And I think with the with the tax laws, it's very favorable. So I think that's still going to be a growth market for Florida in general.
Thank you.
And about that estimate.
We'll talk about that offline. Thank you all for joining us here on the panel today. Thank you all for your time. Back to you, Dory.
Thank you. Thank you all. Wow. Fantastic. Are your brains on fire yet? Okay. Last session before cocktail hour, so hang in with me because this is a good one. First of all, let's just get everybody revved up. Who has been in the market for 5 or less years? Raise your hand. All right. 10 or less, raise your hand. 20? What does that tell you guys? Okay. Our next, this is the reason I asked the next panel is going to talk about the changed demographic and economic mix that's driving our real estate here in Central Florida. So you're the ecosystem of that. So we have Richard Levy and Jim Gray. Now, Richard Levy, who doesn't know Richard Levy? He is one of our most experienced counselors to public and private sector entities with strategic advisory services. He's going to tell you whether you could build something or not. He can tell you whether land use entitlements can be done or possibly made to happen, who knows. You might know him from working with Lake Nona. It's the master plan community we all know about, and he was with it from the inception, and a corporate officer. But a lot of you all might know him as the former chief administrator of Orlando, and guess what? The first planning bureau chief for the city of Orlando. Yeah, how about that? So he's very degreed. He looks like a professor, right? He's got a PhD in public affairs, a master's in geographic spatial analysis, seriously, and a BA in urban studies. Now, next to him is the one guy that Russ really hoped everybody would be an elected official like him, because his other job is real estate. So on that note, gentlemen, take us to cocktail hour.
Okay, thank you, Dory. Appreciate that. My mother would be very happy with that introduction. I am honored to share the stage with Jim Gray. If you don't know him, he is the managing director of CBRE's Orlando office, and he oversees all of their operations and provides strategic support for business development. Both of us have been around a long time. Jim's been around a lot longer than me. I'm going to keep reminding him of that. Still looking great. He's got hair, I don't. He's been active in Central Florida's commercial real estate market for over 30 years. He's served as president of Gray Point Capital, a commercial real estate investment and advisory firm here in Orlando. He spent 12 years with Parkway Properties, 17 years with First Union Wachovia Bank, managing their real estate, wealth management, and commercial lending in Central Florida. In 2012, as Dory mentioned, he was elected to the Orlando City Commission, and my old stomping grounds, and continues to represent District 1 and Southeast. Are any District 1 residents? Okay, Jim, you can tell the truth today.
Yeah, exactly. No, thank you.
He is a titan of Central Florida real estate. That's how you wanted me to.
There you go.
Okay, you
read it
told me to
perfect.
do that. And he has a very unique vantage point on Central Florida, being his role at CBRE and City Council. So, Jim, we're going to turn it over to you and let you walk us through some of your observations.
Thank God that's over. Thank you, Richard. I had some slides, but I see these two pictures. I think we might just go with those for the next 15 minutes. What do you think?
Leave them up there, yeah.
What do you think?
I'm so old they didn't even have color.
Yeah, exactly. Well, believe me, we are painfully aware that we are 15 minutes away from cocktail hour. We will make it. I promise you, we'll be on time. But Richard and I thought it might be a good way to kind of end the session to share some data that CBRE collected, actually, about kind of post-pandemic, how people expect to live, work, and shop. And so last fall, third quarter of last year, we surveyed 20,000 of our clients to ask them a plethora of questions. And I tried to pull out the big ones that I thought we could talk about here. So with that, let's go to work here. I had to put this slide in, and this is a tribute to anybody that's moved a college kid into a dorm. But when we talk about this, it's a joke. But when we look at the next slide, here's interesting. So when it came to live, there's two graphs here in front of you. The one on the left talks about, and these are by generation. So Gen Z, X, Y, Z, and the baby boomers. So the one on the left shows that almost 50%, our survey showed us 50% of those in Gen Z and Gen Y intend to move in the next 2 years. They might be buying, they might be renting, but they are moving. And some of us are happy about that because they live in our bedrooms at our house. But they've told us loud and clear they're going to go. You can also see at the bottom of that left-hand chart, the baby boomers are saying, we're not going anywhere. We're happy. If you look at the right side of that chart, what the survey told us is of those Gen Y and Zers that want to move, they want to go more into the city center. And I would caution us to remember, city center doesn't necessarily mean downtown. It can, but it also can mean the town center concept, where you have everything from where you can have food and drink and groceries and recreation, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But clearly the younger folks are restless and they want to move. So the next part of the survey said, where are they going to move? What do they want? And clear, again, the survey clearly told us that they want bigger homes in nicer neighborhoods, and primarily to account for working from home. Now, remember, bigger is all relative. Again, if you're living in your parents' house in a bedroom, if you go to a one-bedroom apartment, you just hit the mansion. But so everything's relative, but folks are recognizing there is a component to working from home, and they want to have bigger accommodations in nicer neighborhoods. And they do tell us in the chart as well that they seem to be willing to pay for that. Now we'll see, again, this was taken in the third quarter of last year. Economy's changed a bit, but what the survey told us is they want it and they're willing to pay for it. And by the way, all these slides are free on the CBRE website, or you can see me and I'll sell them to you for $20. Either way.
You told me 30.
30. So, we know kind of where they want to live, but no secret where you live is influenced by your work. And so what this chart shows us is, without question, like it or not, the survey clearly says the hybrid model is desired. Let's not make any mistake, the salary package is still key. If you're willing to pay your employees 50% over the market, they'll work Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. But if you're going to pay market, which most of us are doing that, flexibility in its various forms is now a far more significant factor in job selection. And here's what the chart showed us. If you look at the dark area, and it's highlighted by the bullet point at the top, that's kind of what the survey, when we asked them, currently, what do you do? And then the light kind of green shade is what they desire. So if you look at the first one, all days at the office. Currently, people are saying about 35% of them said, yep, I go to the office pretty much every day. When you ask them what they really like, they said, 20% feels pretty good to me. So you go to the next category and you say, those who are predominantly now in an office hybrid, more time in the office than home, that seems to be the equilibrium. It's about 45%, current and desired. The third category was predominantly remote. Again, 20% are currently remote. And they want to bump that to 30%, no doubt. The last one is never in the office. That's 5%. As I told Richard, those are unemployed people, because if they never want to come in the office, nobody's going to hire them. So I think the point of all this is, like it or not, and we all have different ideas about this, the reality is the workforce across the country is saying, we want a hybrid model, and unless you're willing to pay us above market, give it to us, or we'll find somebody that will. And so what's the number one challenge to getting people in the office? And it's clear, it's commute time. And this is all because of the pandemic. Those who were stuck at home realized, hey, I don't have to sit in traffic so long, so this feels pretty good. So that's the number one objection people have to go in the office is commute time. And the chart here, again, the dark is what is current and the light is what is desired. So the two bars on the left, the people we surveyed said, of those that drive 0 to 30 minutes to work, how many is that? And that's about 60%, 57 to be exact. But they said, you know what would feel better? 75% of the time. So 0 to 30 is the sweet spot. For those that are 30 to 60 minute commute times, currently that's 37%. And again, what they're telling you is, I don't want to do that anymore. Only 24% said they're willing to do that. The one that scares me, being in the real estate business and you too, is who's willing to drive more than 60 minutes to work? Currently that's 7%, and the survey told us 2%. And why that's scary is if you're in a big major city, almost by definition, commute times are over an hour. And again, the workforce is saying, I don't want to do that anymore. So those employers in the big city, CBRE is one of them, we're going to have to figure out how do we get employees to come to the office even with a hybrid model, because a lot of those folks have to drive more than an hour to get to work. So we know where people kind of want to live, right? They want to live in kind of city center or town center concepts. We know they want to have a hybrid model. So with that, how are they going to shop? And what's the implications for us? And clearly, this chart, and now I'm kind of going into CBRE research, not the survey. This isn't the survey, this is CBRE research, but I thought I'd share it because it leads into why we're doing so well in industrial here in Central Florida. No mistake, the brick and mortar stores, still 70% or 80% today are brick and mortar shopping. That includes grocery, which is a big, big component of it. But because of the baby boomers who are kind of starting to save their coins for retirement, not shopping as much, the younger generation clearly wants e-commerce. And what our research tells us is what is today 20% is in the next 10 years is going to go to 32%. So it's here to stay, and the retailers have to figure out how do we accommodate our clients. And here's the big challenge for the retailers. This is our research. There's kind of 5 cost categories. It's a very busy chart. But for retailers, it's no shock. The biggest cost they have is transportation and labor, and that can be as much as 70% of the logistics spend. So retailers can no longer efficiently and profitably afford to send down the goods to us from Atlanta and Memphis. We all want our stuff in 24 to 48 hours, and it's hugely expensive to go back and forth. And so what we're seeing is warehouse storage is becoming much more regional. And we're the beneficiary of that in Central Florida, because what a lot of our clients are doing is building warehouses here in Central Florida where they can not only tap Central Florida, but they can get to South Florida and back within 24 to 48 hours. So a big component of that. The other part we're hearing about why warehouse is so good is supply chain issues. Caused retailers a lot of problems. And so now they want to have extra warehouse space to make sure they don't get stuck again if we have more of the supply chain shortages. And again, here's, it doesn't matter what food group you're in, every one of those occupiers, from dry goods to groceries to building supplies, say they expect their demand for warehouse to go up by at least 10%. So how are we going to accommodate this? And this is our research to talk about capacity for warehouses. It's, again, kind of a busy chart. I highlighted the Florida cities in yellow. But when you look at it, in our opinion, there's not a market in the country that's overbuilt with warehouse right now. Slightly overbuilt, the closest to us, you might want to say Atlanta. In equilibrium, we feel Fort Lauderdale, Jacksonville, and Orlando, among others, are about in equilibrium. But still, supply is less than demand in Miami, Palm Beach, and Tampa. So if you operate in any of those, I think the horizon is good for you. So last slide, maybe to sum all this up, is kind of how can all of us here maybe take advantage of some of this in our businesses. And again, in the residential, just to recap, you can read them there, but there's upgraded housing demand. Again, the economy may put a little governor on that for a short term, hopefully for not long. The younger generation wants to get to city centers and design properties with renters in mind. From the work aspect, commute time is key. Prioritize accessibility to the office. That's parking, that's mass transit. We heard in the survey employees don't like the hassle of parking long distances and walking to work. Use offices to drive engagement and upgrade the office environment. And finally, in the shopping and warehousing, availability of product and customer experience is key. Younger generations are going more online. And finally, high transportation costs is driving our warehouse demand. So that's it, Richard.
Jim, great data, really intriguing insights into what's going on in different sectors. Let's see if we can't sort of talk a little bit about what some of these mean to Orlando and Central Florida. I did learn earlier that Orlando is a suburb of Sanford, which was news to me. And your data showed that the younger want to move closer to city centers. And of course, people like you and I want to move out, the older. But as you said, Orlando is a young metropolitan area. And so we talk about city center. Obviously, the traditional urban core is downtown Orlando. But there is a transformation going on in a lot of the satellite municipalities and cities. You talk a little bit about those markets and what you see.
Yeah, sure. What we're seeing, and that was a shameless plug for Lake Nona there, I think, folks. That's what I'm seeing. No, what we're seeing is those that I talked a little bit about the town center concept, and that is appealing to folks because, and I'll, I'm talking about the Lake Nonas, the Hamlins, the the packing district that's growing in College Park, Baldwin Park. Why? Because people can live, work, and play in their neighborhood. And the best example is where I live, which is Lake Nona. Look, the great news about Lake Nona, yes, it has an airport close by, but there's a lot of good, high-paying jobs. The schools are good. There's plenty of shopping in the town center and refreshments and goodies, and lots of recreation opportunities. Why do my neighbors love it? It's quality of life. And what they're telling me is, hey, Jim, I can drop the kids off at school. I can still be in at work by 8:30-ish. I can do my stuff, and then I can still stay at the office till 5 or 5:30, but I can get home in 5 or 10 minutes, and I can go to PTA, I can coach Little League, I can do all that stuff. And look, as a guy that's officed downtown for my entire career, we've all done it. 4 o'clock comes and you go, oh, I got Little League practice, I gotta go. But folks out in these town centers are enjoying that lifestyle, and it's that blend between, the balance between work and life. So I think that continues, and Lake Nona's a great example, but so is Hamlin, and Winter Garden is experiencing that. And so there's a lot of that going on.
So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg question because you talked a lot about commute times and people want to be closer to employment. But if they're living further out in some of these town centers, is employment going to follow where the people are? And is that a challenge for instance, you talked about the work sector and the office market?
Right. Yeah, I think it will, and we're starting to see it with some of our clients. Some of our clients, instead of having a major office downtown, are choosing to have 3 remote offices. You got to get your IT folks lined up so you can talk to each other. But look, I don't know about you folks, but when the economy was roaring, the number one challenge we all had was finding good employees. And it was an employee market. And employers, if they're smart, if you want the good employees, you got to give them what they want. And so I do think that this town center and the suburban, for lack of a better term, nodes will work. And that is, instead of having 30,000 square feet downtown, I want 3 10,000 square feet offices in the suburbs. And doesn't mean we can't get folks together at different places, but I think that is a trend we're starting to see more of.
And will that put pressure on existing office inventory, pricing, absorption, and are we going to see a higher density of employees per square foot in office?
Boy, that's a tough one. Yes and no. How's that?
Okay.
That's great, huh? Yes and no. Look, right now, I would think occupancy down. There's two parts, right? What's leased and what's occupied. In downtown, I think it's plus or minus 50% is what's occupied. And our clients are trying to figure out how do they repurpose their office such that they can attract these hybrid workers. I think most employers have kind of conceded to the fact that they're not going to get everybody in every day. But there's got to be something special about the office to get them to make that 30-minute plus or minus commute. And typically what we're seeing our clients do is try to make more open space, more collaborative space. So the things they can do by themselves, they can do hybrid, they can do it at home. But the team meetings and the collaboration, they come to the office to do that. So it doesn't necessarily mean they'll need less space. I just think it's going to be reconfigured. Now, the challenge with that is it's expensive to do that.
Right.
So you're hoping you have a good landlord and you're willing to sign a longer-term lease, so they'll help you pay for that. But that's the big challenge that our clients are facing in the office is how do we reconfigure our space to attract employees. I will say while we're on that, and you watch the time, because we do not want to be late for cocktails, is what we're finding, it's here in Orlando, we're seeing it in Tampa as well, that 10 years ago, the value space was going, and I hate to pick on Maitland, but I'm going to, kind of 90s vintage buildings, the $18, $19 a square foot, that was the value play, and a lot of companies were doing that because it was cheap, and they still do. But what we're finding is companies, again, to attract good employees, are willing to pay a higher rental rate if they're in a Class A quality building. And the best example I can give you is in Tampa, down on Water Street by the stadium. Mixed use, office residential, office hotel, but there's action. There's things for people to do, and employers are saying, we'll spend $40, $45 a square foot on rent because employees will come to the office and we think we can make them more productive.
That's great. Let's finish out with a couple of thoughts. You talked about retail and online shopping increasing. If my household's any indication, it's going through the roof. I do know that brick and mortar is important because you got to have a place to return it instead of sending it back. Right. So your view of future of brick and mortar retail? Yeah, I kind of put brick and mortar retail kind of where I put the banks right now. I mean, think about the banking model. Most of us here do online banking. We'll go to the bank for foreign exchange or something, but there still is a component of the banking industry's clients, specifically high net worth people, that want to come to the bank. They want you to tell them how rich they are, help them out, and get them on the way. So it's kind of a dual delivery model. And I think that's where we are in retail. Folks that want something right away, typically that's clothing, jewelry, some of those things, they want to touch it, they want to feel it, and they want to buy it right there and go home. Electronics, a TV's a TV. We can get it or we can order it. We don't really care. So I think it's a dual delivery system, which is more expensive. But I think if you don't do it, you risk alienating and losing some of your clients or customers. And finally, Jim, on logistics and warehousing and distribution, you had some positive things to say about Orlando, the view of the Orlando market. You and I can remember the days when a 300,000 square foot building was a big deal. But today, million-plus square foot buildings are becoming more the norm. Do we have enough land allocated for industrial use in our region going forward?
We have enough land. Is it in the right spots, right? Because it's got to be near, infrastructure's key. It's got to be near major thoroughfares for the big 18-wheelers. And I guess the best example, we see it when we drive to Tampa, up and down the I-4 corridor. What's attractive about that abundant, cheap land, and you can do a plus or minus million square foot warehouse, and you can service Orlando and Tampa. So that's the good news there. Another trend we're seeing now, we talked a little bit about supply shortages, et cetera. We're finding our clients are leasing somewhere between 10 and 20% more space than they need today, primarily because they're afraid when they do need to grow, there's no space. And it's a huge inconvenience to move your warehouse space and re-educate all the drivers how to get to your new warehouse. So that's a good trend too. But yes, there's land, but it's got to be near the major thoroughfares, and that's what kind of pushes it out from the traditional city limits.
Jim, because of your vantage point at CBRE and as an elected official, we really appreciate your perspective today, and thank you for your comments. And if we could just give Jim a big hand for this. Scott, it's all yours.
Thank you both. Appreciate it, everything. One more round of applause for everybody, all the panelists and everything else. So again, like they've reiterated most times, I have the most unenviable position to be between you and, as Jim put it, refreshments. I don't know, taking me back to the school year. So just want to briefly touch base. I'm Scott Minganay, Kimley Horn. I'm the past district chair for our Central Florida Council, which means now I don't do anything. I just refer to all these great people that put a lot of this stuff together. One round of applause. You've seen them throughout today. Kurt Ostraka, Dory, thank you so much. Appreciate all your hard work. Awesome day of events. I have copious notes, and I only wanted to talk about just a couple of hot takes. I kept trying to write down, I'm no Stephen A. Smith, but I kept writing down for those hot takes, those salient things that we'll talk about at refreshments later. A couple of things. I love the idea that Mitch was talking about jobs chase people. I mean, we're in an enviable position in Florida. So hopefully more to come. The idea of strategy has to be agile. I will continually fight this idea of working from home because we believe, I'll take my ULI position out and go back to the firm, that we believe investing in people, mentoring people, day-to-day collaboration, the team will trump all of that. And so it has to be we, collectively, this group, ULI, has to have a strategy that has to be agile. TOD panel, awesome, that entire group. But 6,300 dwelling units over 10 years, 630 units per year, it's not enough. We, ULI, we collectively, this industry, we need to do better. We can do better, so we need to be thinking about those things. They gave us some tips, buy land. Jeff, where are you? Jeff Reader, he's talking about DeBerry, some other municipalities on transit. You guys need to chase those opportunities. Attainable housing. Great panelists, loved the thought process. Again, they challenged us a lot. Challenged us talking about where those public-private partnerships really need to occur. The statement that really resonated with me, growth, while good, can come and accelerate inequalities as well. So there's things that we need to be watching out for. Growth is good in certain areas. Attainable housing is good. But can it accelerate those inequalities that we need to keep our eye on as a group? Again, we ULI need to do better in a lot of those areas. I do like the idea, shameless plug, as Ryan talked about, no land use chain for industrial. I don't know if any municipalities are on board for that, but we'll figure that out as we go along. The luxury market, great group of folks, but they're subject to a lot of the things that we all talked about, right? Forging resiliency is what this trends has been focused on. The luxury market still has to forge forward. They lost their central plant. That's big issues, even for the luxury market. I look at Charlie as I look at him, but I mean, both of you kind of had to deal with some of those issues. And then really talking about the workforce. Great panels, great insights. Jim, Charlie, really appreciate everything. So with that, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you guys. Refreshments are out that door. Look forward to being engaged with everybody here as a part of ULI. Hopefully become a member and you'll get more of this kind of programming and options for the future. Thank you, everybody.